Warrior Lore. Chapter 3600. Of course, this kind of small defensive formation was nothing to Xiaohua right now. Xiaohua didn't need to look at the profundity and power of the defensive formation like he did when he faced the 5 brocade cloud painting, nor did he need to show off his might here. He only smiled and slapped the top of his head. A powerful pressure came out of nowhere, and soon after, a nascent soul hand that could cover the entire valley appeared. Rumble. The nascent soul hand streaked across the sky, colliding with the vast chi pillar and the whirlwind. A huge roar resounded through the entire valley. The soul-wrenching screams were loud at first, but soon after, they stopped abruptly like a chicken or duck being choked by its neck. The countless sharp weapons pierced into the nascent soul's hand in a frenzy, but in the face of the massive hand, they were no more than ants trying to shake a tree. Although the sounds of friction were incessant, they quickly disappeared amid rumbling booms. However, the instant Xiaohua's big hand imprisoned all the inscriptions in the valley, Wu. Another wave of surging sound came from the cold pond. Clusters of golden light appeared in the dark green pond, and the entire pond suddenly gave birth to thousands of whirlpools. These whirlpools were actually able to break through the imprisonment of Xiaohua's nascent soul hand, as if thousands of small snakes were pouncing into Xiaohua's nascent soul hand. This restriction is actually somewhat interesting. Xiaohua sensed that the entire nascent soul hand was sore and numb. First, the imprisoned cold energy wanted to respond to the weak water, and the edges of the nascent soul hand actually had some dark blue color. This weak water is actually poisonous. What was even more unexpected to Xiaohua was that the poison of this weak water was actually very powerful. Just as the dark blue color appeared on the nascent soul hand, the imprisonment at the edges of the nascent soul hand showed signs of loosening. The imprisonment slightly loosened, and the whirlwind rose up again, and the vast chi pillar also loudly fell down again. Good, it's not simple. Previously, this Xiao felt that the early gold core stage might not be able to resist it. If the defensive formation of this pond and the defensive formation of the cliff complement each other, I'm afraid that even the middle gold core stage won't be able to pass through. Xiaohua was inwardly speechless. He had just entered the Yaodai mountain and had yet to understand anything, yet he had already encountered such a large formation. Perhaps the Yaodai mountain that was several tens of thousands of li was this powerful? Thinking about the thousands of golden core cultivators, Xiaohua couldn't help but worry for them. Pondering in his heart, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly waved his hand, and the clear water bottle appeared in his hand. His hand formed a Buddhist seal and hit it. Whoosh! A suction force was generated from the clear water bottle, and it covered the tens of thousands of weak water snakes. Indeed, everything has its nemesis. Under the suction force of the Buddhist artifact, these weak water snakes all surrendered. How could they still care about corroding the hand of a Yuanying? Streams of water flowed into the clear water bottle, and the water in the pool gradually fell. The weak water's corrosion was no longer present, and the entire defensive formation surrounding the mountain valley was unable to withstand Xiaohua's Yuanying's hand. With a light kachet sound, the Yuanying's hand grasped all of the tiny imperial equipment in its hand. Xiaohua's current spiritual sense and mind could not be considered particularly harmonious, but dealing with these tiny imperial equipment was still a piece of cake. Xiaohua's mind followed the spiritual sense in the Yuanying's hand and swept all of the imperial equipment into the space. The ground of the entire valley was as clean as if it had been licked by a dog. It's a pity that these inscriptions were carved into the ground. Even if this Xiao has the ability to scour 3 feet of the ground, I don't know if they will still be useful after I collect them. Xiaohua prepared to withdraw the Yuanying's hand. Looking at the alternating light and dark inscriptions on the ground, he inwardly pondered. However, he quickly had a good idea. The Yuanying's hand fiercely grabbed the ground. With a loud boom, a large piece of the ground was grabbed by Xiaohua. That ground was originally as hard as iron, but under the Yuanying's hand, it became pure soil. The tiny inscriptions on the ground were immediately crushed by Xiaohua's hand, and they transformed into streams of awe-inspiring qi that rushed into the air, disappearing in a moment. Haha, exactly. Refreshed. Seeing this, Xiaohua was very happy. He was multitasking. On one hand, he urged the Yuanying's hand to destroy the inscriptions in the valley one by one. On the other hand, he urged his psyche power to collect the weak water. After half an hour, the entire valley, whether it was the stone walls or the ground, was in a mess. There was not a single inscription to be seen. Looking at the previously serene cold pool, the pool water was clean, revealing the dark blue bottom of the pool. There were also many inscriptions at the bottom of the pool, as if pieces of articles were engraved there. As for the center of the pool, there were some white bones above the inscriptions that had not been completely corroded by the weak water. Alas, there are 3,000 weak water. Just one scoop is enough to kill a cultivator. It shows that its corrosive power is very strong. 10 years ago, the cultivators who fell into the weak water had already lost their bones. Seeing these white bones, Xiaohua sighed. These white bones must be the Jindan cultivators who participated in this year's Yaodai meeting. How long has it been? And there are already cultivators who died in this weak water pool. Destroy it. Xiaohua urged his Yuanying's hand again. In just a moment, the inscriptions at the bottom of the pool were destroyed again. The moment the inscriptions completely disappeared, Xiaohua immediately felt relaxed. Xiaohua was overjoyed and hurriedly released his divine sense. Sure enough, the previous seal on the valley had completely disappeared. His divine sense could spread out for more than 10 miles. The entire Yaodai Mountain is still within a huge defensive formation. Pull one hair, and the whole body will be affected. Xiaohua understood that this must be the suppression of the Taoist cultivator's divine sense by Star-Lord Hall. Withdrawing his Yuanying's hand and looking at the messy valley, Xiaohua urged his figure to fly into the air, ready to leave. However, his figure had just flown a few feet when his heart was moved again. He waved his hand, and Little Silver and Little Gua landed in the air. You two, go and see if there are any good things in this valley. The two little things were very obedient, not rebellious like Little Yellow at all. They each landed in a place. In just a moment, Little Gua came back with his head drooping and somewhat dejected. His little mouth was pursed and his hands were empty. Ha ha! Xiaohua smiled, patted his head and put it into his space. Little Silver, on the other hand, poked his head out of the messy mud and stones and chirped at Xiaohua. Xiaohua understood. He lowered his figure and waved his big sleeve. A lot of huge stones and mud were lifted up. A fist-sized bead, emitting a bewitching light, was revealed in the bottom of the deep pool. Weak water bead? Xiaohua was delighted. He grabbed at the air with one hand, and that bead fell into his hand. Sure enough, waves of water surged inside the bead. His divine sense was immediately swallowed when he immersed it. It was the weak water bead, a Taoist magic treasure. Looking at the weak water bead in his hand and thinking about the many Taoist cultivators who died in this valley, Xiaohua's heart was filled with mixed feelings. If a cultivator was strong, the Taoist sect would be strong. If a cultivator was weak, the Taoist sect would be weak. Confucian cultivators used Taoist magic treasures to kill Taoist cultivators, and Taoist cultivators came to throw away their lives one by one every 10 years. Now, they were going to fight to the death for only 10 imperial preceptor slots. Their miserable fates were nothing more than this. Alas, my strength is limited and my path is boundless. It seems that what Taoist Master Ching Su said is somewhat reasonable. Xiaohua sighed and flew out of the valley. For the first time, he had the idea of joining hands with someone. At this moment, the Yaodai Mountain was no different from an ordinary blessed land. The blazing sun had already risen to 3 poles high up in the sky. The sunlight wasn't scorching hot. Instead, it was very warm. Gusts of cool breeze blew over, carrying with it the fragrance of the forest. Xiaohua stood in the air above a hill and looked into the distance. Mountain ranges were stacked on top of each other, and layers of green trees and green grass were pleasing to the eye. Looking behind him, there was a mountain peak that looked like an ink brush that pierced the sky. There were some palaces and spiritual trees on it. Some immortal birds were flying around the mountain peak. It looked extremely blurry. Wasn't this the Yaodai Mountain that he saw earlier? Xiaohua looked for a moment and couldn't see anything strange. This Yaodai Mountain was still a mountain range that was tens of thousands of li in size. Thousands of cultivators were casually sent into it. Under the situation where divine sense was suppressed, it would not be easy to encounter a cultivator. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and released his divine sense. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, his divine sense was also suppressed in this Yaodai Mountain. However, his divine sense was slightly better and could be released tens of li away. But even so, it was the lot of 10 state teachers. Only ghosts knew where it would land. It was impossible to find it by relying on ordinary divine sense. He could only rely on luck. Li Xiang's jade eyes had some description of the Yaodai Mountain. However, that description was also very clear. It was only what he saw when he entered the Yaodai Mountain. Just as he said, there was no reference at all, because the valley they entered was completely different from the deep forest that Li Xiang entered. After rushing out of the deep forest, the mountain range was also different from what Xiao Hua saw now. What Xiao Hua could do now was to try his luck and see if he could use his divine sense to find the lot of state teachers one step ahead. Since he was trying his luck, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and didn't release his divine sense. He flew towards a place. Xiao Hua didn't believe it. This Yaodai Mountain had thousands of Taoist cultivators. Plus Star-Lord Hall's Confucian cultivators who would dare to compete with him in luck. Moreover, didn't Xiao Hua release his divine sense for tens of li? Xiao Hua with his eyes closed clearly flew straighter than Xiao Hua with his eyes open. After flying for no less than half a meal's time, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and released his divine sense. He saw that he had stopped above a lush green mountain forest. That mountain forest was sandwiched between two mountain peaks. At a glance, it was over 100 li in size. The ancient trees in the mountain forest towered. From time to time, the sound of gurgling water could be heard. Occasionally, the howls of ferocious beasts could be heard from the mountain forest. Xiao Hua's gaze swept through the mountain forest. After looking for a moment, he raised his head again and looked at the sky. Then, he turned his head again to look at the distant Yaodai Mountain. His figure slowly descended. He carefully released his divine sense, preparing to investigate bit by bit. However, Xiao Hua's divine sense had only explored 100 zhang when a mournful scream came from the mountain forest to his left. That scream was very muffled. Just as it sounded, it was immediately suppressed. It was as if a cultivator was swallowed by a ferocious beast. Hearing this, Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. At the same time that his divine sense swept over, he used the wind escape technique. His entire figure flew over like a gust of wind. -12. Chapter 3601. Boom boom. Waves of awe-inspiring chi fell from the sky, and layers of strange clouds soared into the sky from a corner of the mountain forest. Another Confucian cultivator's defensive formation entered. Xiao Hua flew closer and looked at the picturesque ancient trees within a range of several li. Whether it was the stems, leaves, or trunks, they were all emitting mist, and inscriptions flashing with azure brilliance flowed between the leaves of these ancient trees. He immediately understood that this was a defensive formation composed of thousands upon thousands of ancient trees, and if there was no accident, it should be of the wood attribute. Almost without thinking, Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and the Yuanying's hand appeared again. It turned into 100 zhang in size and grabbed from top to bottom. Kacha, like a thunderclap, the ancient trees within 100 zhang were all grabbed by the huge hand, and the entire ground shook. Clusters of inscriptions carrying awe-inspiring chi condensed into a 1 zhang long spear that pierced into the huge hand. Unfortunately, before the spear could pierce into the huge hand was already shattered by the restrictive force. Roar! The huge hand overturned the defensive formation, revealing the situation inside. 100 zhang huge beast roared and rushed out from the defensive formation. Under the huge beast, a bloody smell was emitted. The craggy mountain rocks were actually covered with bones. Some of the bones were dried up, and some of the bones were dripping with blood. It was quite glaring. This giant beast was like an ox, with a single horn that was several zhang long standing straight on its forehead. The tip of the horn carried a cold light, and the long fur on the giant beast's body flickered with a green brilliance. A single large hoof stepped on the green clouds, and with an indescribable berserk aura, it pounced towards Xiao Hua. Ho! Xiao Hua slightly wrinkled his brows. He knew that this was a kind of ancient beast. Its entire body was coarse and thick, and it was difficult for ordinary magic weapons to break through it. This Ho's mouth and nose could spit out a strange stream of air. This stream of air was the most corrosive magic weapons and magic weapons. Even the protective golden light of a Jindan cultivator would find it difficult to resist. He had only seen this thing in Huang Yi's many ancient memories, and he didn't expect to encounter it in the hidden immortal continent. Just as Xiao Hua had expected, the Hui rushed into the air and violently charged towards Xiao Hua. Even when Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand descended, the restrictive power was unable to stop the strange airflow from the Hui's horn. Rise, Xiao Hua sneered. The invisible nascent soul inside his body rubbed its hands together. In an instant, the nascent soul's hands suddenly expanded to the size of several mu. Moreover, this several mu-sized hand became much more solid. Puff, puff. The nascent soul's chi waves were shattered one by one, and it forcefully grabbed the chi. The giant palm swayed and was about to grab the Hui from the air. Roar! The Tai Chi was enraged. Its eyes were bloodshot as it let out a long roar. Green waves of air rushed out of its nose and mouth, slamming into the nascent soul's hand. The nascent soul's hand rapidly collapsed. At the same time, a dazzling brilliance appeared on the wild beast Hui's body. This brilliance was like an arrow that directly pierced into the nascent soul's hand. Moreover, within the brilliance was a wisp of green chi. This green chi caused the giant palm to give birth to a slippery feeling. Attacked from both inside and outside, Xiao Hua's giant palm was the same as before. It actually had a feeling of being unable to hold on. Xiao Hua was slightly startled. He knew that this was a Confucian cultivator from Star-Lord Hall who had a very good understanding of the Dao sect's nascent soul's hand. Whether it was the defensive formation or the ferocious beast, they all seemed to have the means to resist the restrictive power of the Dao sect. However, after Xiao Hua was surprised, he sneered again. It was also a nascent soul's hand. Xiao Hua didn't believe that this insignificant giant Tai Chi could escape from his nascent soul's hand. Withdraw, Xiao Hua snorted coldly. The magic power in his body surged. The giant palm flashed with a golden brilliance and once again exerted more force, crushing the green chi and the brilliance into pieces. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's mind stretched out and tried to absorb the struggling Hui into his space. The giant Tai Chi was at least 100 zhang in size. Now, one of its hooves was vigorously kicking, and the tip of its horn was also sharp. Xiao Hua's mind followed the nascent soul's hand and wrapped around the Hui. A tearing force that the giant Tai Chi couldn't resist was gradually born. Woo! The giant Tai Chi struggled with all its might for a moment. It seemed to be somewhat exhausted, and the hissing sound in its mouth also began to become hoarse. Just when Xiao Hua's mind was set and he was preparing to think of a way to subdue the giant Tai Chi, suddenly, the surface of the giant Tai Chi's body flashed with thousands of dense inscriptions. What was even more strange was that the inscriptions near the mouth and nose of the giant Tai Chi were like ants pouring into the body of the giant Tai Chi. A fierce, destructive aura with a sense of despair was born out of thin air and frantically poured into the giant Tai Chi's mouth and nose. Not good. Xiao Hua seemed to have realized something. He hurriedly pulled his mind out of the nascent soul's hand. At the same time, he withdrew his magic power and his divine sense. The nascent soul's hand instantly collapsed. Although Xiao Hua saw the opportunity quickly in the end, he was still a bit slower. When the giant Tai Chi escaped from the nascent soul's hand, it didn't escape like it usually did. Instead, it desperately struggled in the distance. It was even more miserable than when it was caught by the nascent soul's hand before. Boom! With a loud sound, the 100 zhang large giant Tai Chi exploded with a loud bang. Its flesh and blood mixed with a berserk aura rushed towards Xiao Hua. Seeing that this unimaginable explosion didn't scatter in all directions, but instead directly rushed towards him, how could Xiao Hua not know that this giant Tai Chi was another method that Confucian cultivators used to kill Dao cultivators? Although the explosion hadn't hit Xiao Hua's body yet, Xiao Hua's divine sense had already been affected by this strange explosion. His entire Niwen palace shook, and an indescribable dizziness appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Xiao Hua didn't care about hiding anything. He used the Devil Realm's concealing technique, and his figure quickly disappeared. However, he saw that the pitch-black brilliance in the air was slightly distorted. The impact of the explosion had already dispersed this distortion. When Xiao Hua's figure appeared again, there was a slight anger on his face. He was originally very careful, but he really didn't expect that Confucian cultivators' methods were everywhere. This giant Tai Chi was not only a vicious beast that could kill gold core cultivators, but also a weapon that could kill nascent soul cultivators. Xiao Hua, who was greedy for small gains, almost fell for a big trick. Moreover, as soon as Xiao Hua's figure appeared, dozens of pillars of Aoran Qi appeared out of thin air and attacked Xiao Hua for no reason. This Aoran Qi actually carried a kind of tyranny, as if Xiao Hua was the enemy of the world. Damn it! Xiao Hua suddenly woke up. This was Yaodai Mountain. If he used the Devil Realm's cultivation technique, wouldn't he be courting death? He hurriedly used the wind escape technique. His figure flashed, and he escaped far away. Only then did the vast Qi pillars scatter with a loud bang. In the air, that desolate aura gradually disappeared. The violent force destroyed the several hundred zhang mountain forest in the direction Xiao Hua had been at. The original defensive formation had been completely destroyed. The white bones that Xiao Hua saw just now were only a part of the cultivators who had died in the formation. Looking at the forest of white bones, Xiao Hua's heart was touched again. After releasing Little Silver and Xiao Gua, Xiao Hua spat out the true Samadhi fire, which turned into a fire net and burned all the white bones in the range of several li. After waiting for a while, Xiao Gua's face was full of pride. She brought back some spiritual herbs. These spiritual herbs were quite rare, and most of them weren't in Xiao Hua's space. Hearing Little Silver's chirping in the distance, Xiao Hua naturally knew what it had discovered. After landing, Xiao Hua discovered that Little Silver was actually anxiously scurrying around in the ground. However, Little Silver, who had always been able to freely escape through the earth, was only able to escape a few inches underground before being unable to go any further. A strange expression appeared in Xiao Hua's eyes. Forming a seal with his hands, he also tried to escape underground. However, he was only able to escape a few zhang underground before being unable to go any further. Confucian cultivators really have painstakingly operated this Yaodai Mountain for who knows how many years. I'm afraid that within several tens of thousands of li, the surface of the ground has been used with Confucian techniques. And it's possible that it's Taoist techniques. Xiao Hua looked pensive. No Taoist cultivator can use the 5 elements escape technique to explore underground, and it's also impossible for them to escape underground. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "No need to go down. Let's see what's around us." Chirp, chirp. Little Silver replied a few times before running off in another direction. Not long after, it actually brought back some materials for refining tools, as well as a bloody horn. Wasn't that the horn of the giant hoe from before? Looking at the bloody horn, although Xiao Hua didn't know what use this thing had, thinking about how this horn was able to pierce through his nascent soul's hand, he knew that it was definitely a good thing. Xiao Hua put the horn into his space, then waved his nascent soul's hand to destroy all the trees within a few miles. Only then did he feel refreshed. Seeing that the sun didn't seem to move at all, Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He beckoned with his hand, and wind blew under Little Silver's feet. Little Silver swung its grass-like tail and landed on Xiao Hua's hand. Little Silver's tail naturally wrapped around Xiao Hua's pinky finger. Chirp, 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 chirp. Little Silver stood up, clasped its 2 little paws in front of its face, and bowed to Xiao Hua, as if asking what Xiao Hua wanted to do. Xiao Hua looked at Little Silver's appearance and was a little bewildered. When Little Yellow was here, he could faintly hear Little Silver's voice. Moreover, when Little Yellow and Little Black took the rejuvenation pill, Xiao Hua didn't forget to give one to Little Silver. However, Little Yellow and Little Black could already speak, while Little Silver still couldn't speak. He didn't know if it was because Little Silver had eaten too many spirit herbs since childhood, or if Little Silver wasn't smart enough. Xiao Hua regretted not letting Little Silver out to see what the Imperial Tutor's lot looked like before the Dragon Gate. When he described it to Little Silver at that moment, Little Silver tilted its head a little, and there was some confusion in its sparkling little eyes. Xiao Hua could only stretch out a finger and point at the space between the little guy's eyebrows. In an instant, Little Silver's eyes lit up. It blinked its eyelids and sniffed its little nose. Its body flew out of Xiao Hua's hand, and it ran around in the air. To Xiao Hua's surprise, after a while, the treasure-seeking mouse, which had always been known for its keen sense of smell, actually landed in his hand again. It raised its two little paws and spread its paws in a lifelike manner. If it wasn't for the fact that its shoulders were connected, and it was extremely hard to distinguish, it would have shrugged its shoulders. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and understood that there were only two reasons why Little Silver couldn't find the Imperial Tutor's lot. One was that the closest Imperial Tutor's lot was beyond Little Silver's search range. The other was that the Imperial Tutor's lot had fallen inside the Imperial Array, which had completely concealed its aura. -12. Chapter 3602. All right. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and flicked Little Silver's little, but with his middle finger. Go look for it. This old man will follow you. Before Xiao Hua could finish speaking, Little Silver's nose suddenly twitched, and his body turned into a silver light as he flew off in a certain direction. Great! Overjoyed, Xiao Hua hurriedly used his wind escape technique to chase after Little Silver, and at the same time, he released his soul consciousness in that direction. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they unexpectedly encountered two golden core cultivators. These two golden core cultivators were in a very sorry state and looked like they had just escaped from a defensive formation. When the two golden core cultivators saw Xiao Hua and Little Silver, they were delighted. Seeing the joy in their eyes, how could Xiao Hua not know what they were thinking? He coldly snorted and no longer concealed his cultivation. The pressure of a nascent soul cultivator suddenly gushed out, causing the two of them to be frightened to the point their faces turned deathly pale, and they almost collapsed in the air. Xiao Hua was too lazy to pay attention to them and directly flew after Little Silver. The two golden core cultivators dejectedly flew off in the opposite direction. It was just that as Little Silver flew, he stopped and looked around as if he couldn't find his way. Xiao Hua smiled as he scooped Little Silver up and put him on his shoulder before continuing to fly forward. Not long after, the originally warm sunlight actually turned cold. Xiao Hua saw two undulating mountain ranges appear in front of him. They looked very abrupt and were grayish-white in color. Hidden in the forest, they looked like two huge pythons biting each other as they surrounded a mountain stream with a radius of more than 10 li. There were no ancient trees in the mountain stream, only large craggy rocks of different sizes. Some were dozens of zhang tall, while others were several zhang tall. Wisps of cold air condensed into ice shards which were born in the mountain stream from time to time. Standing in midair, Xiao Hua had already released his soul consciousness to scan the surroundings. He wasn't in a hurry to act, and only narrowed his eyes at the sun above his head. His gaze then fell on the two mountain ranges, as if he didn't care about the mountain stream at all. At that moment, a sharp wind suddenly blew just several zhang away from Xiao Hua. This wind was extremely cold, and as soon as it appeared, it immediately swept up clusters of ice shards which flew toward Xiao Hua. Little Silver, who was on Xiao Hua's shoulder, suddenly quivered. His little nose twitched a few times, and he was about to fly toward the whirlwind. Come back! Xiao Hua called out to Little Silver, and then raised his head slightly to look at the mountain range opposite them. It was at this moment that Little Silver let out a shrill cry. Its small body suddenly curled up and the fur on its body exploded. Its two bright eyes were filled with vigilance as it looked at the mountain range, just like Xiao Hua. Above the mountain range, there were also two shadows. One was flying in front, and the other was following behind. The shadow in front was not big, but it was flying very fast. A moment later, a sharp divine sense swept over and swept past Xiao Hua before landing on Little Silver. This divine sense was very strange. When Little Silver's divine sense locked onto it, he trembled and whimpered a few times. He didn't dare to stay in the air any longer and first flew to Xiao Hua's shoulder. Then, feeling that it wasn't safe, He looked for Xiao Hua's right hand and landed. His little tail tightly wrapped around Xiao Hua's thumb, and he hid his little head between Xiao Hua's 4 fingers. His entire body curled up, looking very scared. Xiao Hua covered Little Silver with his hand as if to comfort him. He looked at where the shadow came from. When he saw it clearly, he saw that it was an ocelot several feet long. At this moment, the ocelot's eyes were narrowed into slits, and the yellow mark on its forehead that was very similar to the king character was particularly obvious. Behind the ocelot was another tall, young cultivator. This cultivator looked very boorish, with a full beard, a pair of thick black eyebrows, leopard-like eyes, and a large mouth under his big nose. However, the cultivator's expression was rather arrogant, as if he was looking at the top of his head. Before he could fly closer, the middle nascent soul stage divine sense retracted from Little Silver's body and swept towards Xiao Hua. At this moment, Xiao Hua didn't hide his cultivation. The cultivator looked at Xiao Hua with a trace of disdain and casually cupped his hands. "Fellow Taoist, please." Xiao Hua was a bit puzzled and cupped his hands. "I am Xiao Hua. Greetings, fellow Taoist. I am Soaring Lake Country's Fairy Xiang Feng, junior brother. My Taoist name is Xiang Tian." Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't recognize him, the cultivator's face became even more disdainful. He nodded slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's face is a bit unfamiliar, and I've never heard of your name. May I know which senior you work for?" Xiao Hua smiled and said, "All right, Taoist Xiang Tian, I'm not working for any senior. I'm here to compete for the Imperial Tutor's lot at the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Oh, so you want to establish your own country?" Taoist Xiang Tian looked Xiao Hua up and down and said thoughtfully, "Fellow Taoist, Xiao has lofty ambitions. This old man admires you." I wouldn't dare. Seeing that Taoist Xiang Tian's behavior was a bit strange, Xiao Hua was puzzled and said with a smile. Xiang Tian waved his hand and said, "Since you're here to compete for the Imperial Tutor's lot, there's no conflict with this old man. Forget it, this old man will give you some face. How much is your spirit-seeking mouse worth? Give me some face? How much is a spirit-seeking mouse worth?" Xiao Hua was stunned, but then he quickly realized and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiang Tian, I'm very sorry. This spirit-seeking mouse is this Xiao's treasure. I never thought." Xiao Hua. Taoist Xiang Tian didn't wait for Xiao Hua to finish and said coldly, "Could it be that you've never heard of Fairy Xiang Feng?" Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "To be honest, this Xiao has never heard of it." "Good." Taoist Xiang Tian nodded and said seriously, "Since fellow Taoist Xiao has never heard of Fairy Xiang Feng, then this old man will pretend that I didn't hear what fellow Taoist said. This spirit-seeking mouse is not bad. This old man will pay you 100 top-grade primal stones. Give it to this old man." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly in his heart. This Reverend Xiangtian was already a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator, but he was still so ignorant. Xiao Hua really didn't know how he cultivated to mid-nascent soul stage. Oh, it should be said how he lived to mid-nascent soul stage. Not to mention 100 top-grade primal stones. This Xiao wouldn't exchange it even if it was 10 million. Xiao Hua said indifferently, "If fellow Taoist Xiang Tian doesn't have anything else, then this Xiao will enter the defensive formation." A wool. The ocelot suddenly let out a long howl in midair, and its golden fur puffed up like Little Silver's. It opened its eyes at the same time, and its gaze was like lightning as it looked at Little Silver. Little Silver let out a cry and tried to drill into the gap between Xiao Hua's hands. Unfortunately, how big could the gap between Xiao Hua's hands be? It was impossible for Little Silver to drill into it. Taoist Xiang Tian's expression changed greatly. He reached out his hand to touch the Chinkuan bag on his waist, but he quickly put it down and said angrily, "Xiao Hua, don't be so shameless. This old man has already made things clear for you. Hurry up and give this spirit-seeking mouse to this old man. Once this old man's ocelot devours this spirit-seeking mouse and grows up several times, this old man will tell Fairy Xiang Feng your name. Not to mention that you want to establish a country on the hidden immortal continent. Even if you want to cultivate to the late stage of nascent soul, this fairy can help you." Hearing that the ocelot wanted to devour Little Silver, Xiao Hua suddenly realized why Little Silver was so scared. This ocelot should be the spirit-seeking mouse's natural enemy. Xiao Hua coldly looked at the ocelot, and then at Daoist Xiang Tian. He said, "Fellow Daoist Xiang Tian, this Xiao will treat your words as fart. If you want to enter the defensive formation, this Xiao won't stop you. But if you have other thoughts, don't blame this Xiao for being ruthless and not showing mercy." Ha ha ha, not showing mercy? Daoist Xiang Tian laughed. This old man has lived for thousands of years, and those who dared to say such words to me have already turned into ashes. This old man really didn't expect someone to be so arrogant in this Jade Pavilion conference. Xiao Hua was so angry that he laughed. He never thought that his first move in this Jade Pavilion conference would be against a Daoist cultivator. Seeing Daoist Xiang Tian raise his hand to form a seal, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be careless. He stretched out his hand and was about to release the spirit-killing light. Faced with this kind of cultivator who didn't know what was good for him, Xiao Hua absolutely wouldn't show mercy. Who knew how many Daoist cultivators Daoist Xiang Tian had killed before he met him? Ao. The ocelot was clearly connected to Daoist Xiang Tian. Its tail curled up like lightning, and it raised its front paws and pounced at Little Silver in Xiao Hua's hand. At this moment, a beast roar that was very similar to the ocelot's rang out in the distance, followed by a pleasantly surprised voice. Fellow Daoist Xiao? Daoist Xiang Tian frowned slightly and stopped his hand seal. The surging vital qi of heaven and earth around him also stagnated. Xiao Hua was also stunned. His hand stopped in midair. When the two of them looked up, they saw a white-browed nascent soul cultivator with a joyful expression on his face, riding a two-headed monster flying towards them. Daoist Yuanqing? Xiao Hua immediately called out the name when he saw this nascent soul cultivator. However, when he looked around Daoist Yuanqing, he didn't see Hai Hongzi or Hong Songzi. Ao. While Xiao Hua was thinking, the monster under Daoist Yuanqing's feet opened its mouth and roared again. This monster looked like a python, but when it opened its mouth, it roared like an ocelot. Furthermore, when it roared, it spewed out a thick blue cloud. Daoist Xiang Tian's expression was a little strange, but the ocelot was very excited. It no longer looked at Little Silver, and instead roared at the two-headed monster. Let's go. Although Daoist Xiang Tian was domineering, he was still a nascent soul cultivator. When he clearly saw Daoist Yuanqing's cultivation and the monster under him, he immediately made a decision. He no longer paid attention to Xiao Hua, and with a shout, he flew towards the source of the sound. The ocelot, on the other hand, growled a few times unwillingly and followed Daoist Xiang Tian into the wind tunnel. Before it left, it even stuck out its scarlet tongue and licked its lips. But at this moment, Little Silver was showing off again. It actually raised its fat butt and shook it left and right in the air, and its small tail also swayed. It really wasn't clear whether its fear just now was real or just an act. -12. Chapter 3603. Xiao Hua watched Reverend Shangtian disappear with a cold smile on his face. Looking at the ocelot, he knew that Reverend Shangtian might not give up on killing him. Now that Reverend Shangtian saw that Xiao Hua had come to help him, he didn't know the situation and was avoiding him for the time being. Fellow Daoist Xiao, what's going on? Reverend Yuanqing landed on the ground, and the two-headed monster shrank down to only a few feet long. It coiled around Reverend Yuanqing's arm, and its four eyes flashed with a dark green light as it stared fixedly at Little Silver in Xiao Hua's hand. But at that moment, Little Silver wasn't afraid at all. He wrapped his paws around his mouth and licked his little tongue before rubbing his face protectively a few times, as if he was washing his face. The most ridiculous thing was that after washing his face, Little Silver actually stood up and cupped his hands elegantly at immortal Yuanqing, as if he were a little person. Ha ha ha. Reverend Yuanqing naturally knew what his pet was thinking. Seeing Little Silver like this, he laughed heartily and hit the two-headed monster on the forehead with his palm, shouting, "Evil creature, if you dare do that again, I'll pull out your tendons and skin you alive." Oh, whoa. The two-headed monster gave a low howl, looking very aggrieved. It shrank down again and hid its head behind Reverend Yuanqing, not daring to look at Little Silver again. Xiao Hua smiled slightly and rubbed Little Silver's head with his finger. He looked at Reverend Yuanqing and said, "What else could it be?" This so-called Reverend Xiangtian just wants to attack me. Oh, he's Reverend Xiangtian? Reverend Yuan Qing was blank for a moment before a strange expression appeared on his face. He looked meaningfully in the direction where Reverend Xiangtian had disappeared, as if he had already heard of this Reverend Xiangtian. Xiao Hua was blank for a moment before he rubbed his chin and smiled. Oh, fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, do you know this guy? This guy? Reverend Yuan Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is a nascent soul cultivator, but fellow Taoist Xiao actually calls him this guy. You really don't take a Taoist nascent soul cultivator seriously. Whether it's a golden core cultivator or a nascent soul cultivator, I respect all righteous people. For a thief who covets this Xiao's wealth, this Xiao called him a bastard is already enough. Xiao Hua said with a deadpan expression. What if we tie up a late nascent soul stage cultivator? This late nascent soul stage cultivator regards this middle nascent soul stage cultivator as the apple of his eye? Reverend Yuanqing's words carried a hint of ridicule. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes, thinking about Taoist Master Xiangtian's big and burly appearance. In any case, she had nothing to do with Taoist Master Yuanqing's beloved daughter. Taoist Yuanqing looks at Xiao Hua's somewhat dazed expression and seems to understand something. He says with a low laugh, it seems that Taoist Xiao really hasn't heard the story of Taoist Xiang Tian and Fairy Xiang Feng. Xiao Hua shook his head. This Xiao has indeed never heard of it. However, if a pair of golden boy and jade girl cultivated to the nascent soul stage at the same time, then in my hidden immortal continent, it can be considered a beautiful story. Immortal Yuanqing almost burst out laughing. He lowered his voice and said, they can't be called a golden couple, but a golden couple. Golden boy and jade boy? Xiao Hua was rather astonished. He did not seem to understand what Reverend Yuanqing was talking about. Taoist Yuanqing laughs loudly. He pats the two-headed monster with his hand and yells, evil creature, quickly leave. Don't listen to some corner. Roar. The two-headed monster roars loudly and flies towards the place where Taoist Xiang Tian fell. Taoist Yuanqing says to Xiao Hua with a smile, Taoist Xiao, let's go in first. We'll talk as we walk. Xiao Hua asks curiously, didn't fellow Taoist Yuanqing make an appointment with Hong Songzi and Hai Hongzi? Why did you come here yourself? Aren't you going to look for those two first? We did have an agreement. Moreover, the three of us also have a magic tool to communicate with each other. However, this magic tool can only respond within 100 miles. I have already searched several places but did not find any trace of those two. Now that we have met Taoist Xiao and the trace of a rare treasure, we naturally have to look for the rare treasure first. Actually, when I saw fellow Taoist, I already wanted to join hands with fellow Taoist. Unfortunately, Hai Hongzi did not agree and I had no other choice. Now, it seems that I still have fate with fellow Taoist Xiao. Xiao Hua nods and says, since that's the case, it's fine. This Xiao is aiming for the Imperial Preceptor's fortune, while fellow Taoist Yuanqing is aiming for the rare treasure. We don't conflict with each other and can cooperate. That's right, that's right. Taoist Yuanqing glances at the place where the two-headed monster disappeared and says, this defensive formation seems to be closing. Let's go in first. I also want to tell fellow Taoist the story of Fairy Xiang Feng and Taoist Xiang Tian. Good. Xiao Hua says with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yuanqing, please go in first. Taoist Yuanqing does not hold back. Since the two-headed monster did not give any warning, the entrance of the defensive formation was naturally not dangerous. He moves his body and enters the wind tunnel. At the same time, he tells Xiao Hua the story of Fairy Xiang Feng and Taoist Xiang Tian in a low voice. Taoist Yuanqing does not want to talk about it, but when he does, Xiao Hua feels disgusted. After all, Fairy Xiang Feng is not a real fairy but a male cultivator. However, she likes men and thinks of herself as a fairy, so she calls herself Fairy Xiang Feng after reaching the nascent soul stage. This Taoist Xiang Tian is naturally Fairy Xiang Feng's exclusive property. Fairy Xiang Feng likes Taoist Xiang Tian very much and uses all kinds of methods and elixirs to help Taoist Xiang Tian reach the nascent soul stage. Under Fairy Xiang Feng's connivance, Taoist Xiang Tian naturally does not look in anyone's eyes and can take whatever he wants. Others are afraid of Fairy Xiangfeng's power and can only be angry but do not dare to say anything. Damn it! Xiaohua follows Taoist Yuanqing into the formation and sees fog everywhere. Not only is he unable to see far with his naked eyes, even his spiritual sense feels like it is being corroded. He swings his arm as if to drive the fog away and says, "How can there be such a person in this world? It's simply filthy to the extreme." This Xiao is covered in goosebumps just listening to it. Hee. Taoist Yuanqing says with a smile, "There are countless strange people in this world. It's just that we don't know about them. You don't even know how ruthless Fairy Xiangfeng's methods are. No cultivator who falls into Fairy Xiangfeng's hands can come out alive. Even people who hear about his methods are disgusting. No one wants to offend him, and no one wants to fall into his hands." Oh, why is that? Xiaohua, of course, knows that Taoist Yuanqing has not finished his words, so he asks hurriedly. Taoist Yuanqing says, "Actually, Fairy Xiangfeng is also a pitiful person. Although he is very intelligent since he was a child, his fate is full of misfortunes. Before he became a baby, he encountered many disasters. As for what kind of disaster he encountered, it's impossible to know now, because all the people related to him were killed by him after he became a baby. I'm afraid it's because of his previous experience that he has such a strange hobby." This, Xiaohua shakes his head slightly. This person's temperament, I'm afraid, is already twisted. Roar. Just as Xiaohua is speaking telepathically, he suddenly hears an angry roar. Taoist Yuanqing's expression changes drastically when he hears it, and an embarrassed and angry voice bursts out from the bottom of his tongue. "Which blind little bastard dares to bully my Si Hong?" Saying this, Taoist Yuanqing doesn't have time to greet Xiaohua, and his figure turns into a rainbow as he rushes in the direction of the monster Si Hong's angry roar. However, Reverend Yuanqing was truly infuriated. His entire body was flashing with a dark green brilliance. Wherever the rainbow touched, the dense fog would be pushed away. Moreover, the dense fog within a radius of a few feet to the left was frozen into wisps of sparkling and translucent fog, which then fell to the ground. Xiaohua looks at Taoist Yuanqing's back and then at the icy fog, and a look of understanding flashes in his eyes. Since Taoist Yuanqing's target isn't the Imperial Preceptor's lot, then it must be the cold ghost Gaul. Roar, roar. Taoist Yuanqing's figure disappears, and a series of roars can be heard in the distance. Although these sounds are very similar, Xiaohua can clearly hear that they are the cries of the ocelot and Si Hong. At that moment, Little Silver, who is curled up in Xiaohua's palm, suddenly stands up. He looks extremely excited and points his little paw in front of him, urging Xiaohua to speed up. Xiaohua smiles slightly. His figure also sways, and he turns into a golden rainbow as he chases after Taoist Yuanqing. The distance between them is no less than several li. Before Xiaohua can pass through the thick fog, roars can be heard one after another, and the thick fog surges even more. Xiaohua doesn't need to release his soul sense to know that a fierce battle is taking place up ahead. Sure enough, Xiaohua flew to a place where the fog was slightly thinner. Reverend Yuanqing was holding a small halberd that was about a foot long. His body flashed with an intense light, and his eyes were slightly red. He was vigilantly looking in front of him. On the other side of Reverend Yuanqing was Reverend Shangtian. Reverend Shangtian had a look of contempt on his face. He didn't bring out any magic treasures, and he didn't even look at Reverend Yuanqing. His gaze was fixed on the space between the two of them. Si Hong, who had taken out the two-headed monster, was fighting the ocelot. The ocelot is clearly more agile than Si Hong, and is also much more powerful. In the short time that Xiaohua disappeared, the ocelot has already bitten several wounds on Si Hong's back. Thick blue blood seeped out from the wounds. While Si Hong was in pain, he seemed to have gone mad. His two snake-like heads roared and spat out aqua-blue venom towards the ocelot. Unfortunately, the ocelot dodged and spat out an earth-colored light from its mouth. Not only did it avoid the venom, but it also swept the venom back. Although the venom was powerful, even the surrounding fog would be corroded by the venom. However, it had no effect on the ocelot. When Xiaohua appears, Daoist Xiangtian immediately shifts his excited gaze away from the ocelot and coldly glances at Xiaohua. Although he doesn't say anything, the warning in his eyes is obvious. Ayo! At this time, Si Hong's left head roars loudly. Suddenly, it grows 3 times larger and opens its mouth to bite down on the ocelot. The ocelot also roars loudly and then actually pounces towards Si Hong's mouth. Si Hong was stunned for a moment, but soon after, he opened his other mouth and let out a roar. He twisted his neck in a strange manner and attacked the ocelot's tail from the bottom. -12. Chapter 3604. Hee. A strange smile appeared on Reverend Xiangtian's face. He shifted his gaze away from Xiaohua and looked at the ocelot with excitement. Although Xiaohua didn't know how powerful the ocelot was, he knew that Si Hong was about to suffer a great loss. Reverend Yuanqing's face was so gloomy that it seemed like it would drip water at any moment. Sure enough, when the head above Si Hong's head was about to pounce down at lightning speed and the sharp fangs in its mouth were revealed, the ocelot suddenly arched its back and slightly moved to the side when it was only a few feet away from Si Hong's head. Then, the tail that had been curled up behind its back suddenly stretched out and hit Si Hong's head with a paw sound. Si Hong's entire body instantly moved a few feet away. Si Hong's head only moved a few feet away from the ocelot in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Only the dark green poisonous fog brushed past half of the ocelot's body. Ayo! Si Hong's lower head was hit by the ocelot's tail and seemed to be a little dizzy. Si Hong's upper head couldn't be stopped in its tracks, and with a loud bang sound, the upper head couldn't close in time and bit down on the lower head. Not only that, the ocelot, which had just dodged the attack, once again streaked across the air. As it shook its head, its body suddenly expanded, and it bit down on the neck of Si Hong's head. In an instant, dark green blood flowed out from the wound. Si Hong was in great pain. His entire body twisted in midair, and his long tail smashed down on the ocelot with the force of a mountain. Ayo! The ocelot's throat roared and its tail flashed with brilliance as it rapidly expanded. It used all its strength to bite Si Hong's neck and used its tail to attack Si Hong. How dare you, evil creature! Reverend Yuanqing activated the small halberd in his hand. The small halberd immediately emitted a brilliant light, and a python-like shadow emerged from the runes on the halberd. It seemed like it would turn into a dragon and attack as soon as it left his hand. In the distance, Reverend Xiangtian's face turned dark red and his eyes flashed with passion. He looked up at Reverend Yuanqing and said coldly, "Animals fight among themselves. If someone disturbs us, don't blame this old man for not treating you as a human." Reverend Yuanqing bit his lip as if he was enduring and waiting for help, but he didn't look at Xiaohua. At this moment, Little Silver's tail in Xiaohua's hand was released from Xiaohua's thumb. That little claw slightly scratched Xiaohua's palm, as if it wanted to move. Xiaohua's heart thumped, and he flicked Little Silver's, but with his middle finger. Little Silver actually immediately understood Xiaohua's meaning. Wind stirred up under his feet as he flew in the direction of the ocelot and Si Hong. Compared with the ocelot's and Si Hong's imposing and Xiaohua's body, it was pitifully small and pitifully weak. Reverend Yuanqing's when he saw Xiao, little Yuanqing's. Little to Xiangtian, Reverend Yuanqing. Seeing Xiaohua make a move, Reverend Yuanqing was reassured. He didn't think that Little Silver could do anything, but he was sure that Xiaohua wouldn't just stand by and watch. Knowing this, Reverend Yuanqing suddenly attacked with the small halberd in his hand. With a cold aura and a dazzling splendor, the small halberd streaked through the air. The tip of the halberd lengthened as it pierced the space between the ocelot's eyebrows. How dare you! Reverend Xiangtian had been on guard for a long time. He roared angrily, and his whole body trembled as if he was extremely excited. He opened his mouth and a flying sword turned into 10,000 winter plum blossoms and shot into the air. Seeing that the battle between the two nascent soul cultivators was about to break out, Xiaohua put his hand on his waist as if to take out some magic treasure from his Qinkuan bag. But at that moment, Little Silver, who had already flown to the edge of the battle between the ocelot and Si Hong, abruptly turned into a thin silver light and charged straight for the ocelot's back. He was faster than lightning, and furthermore, he didn't make the slightest sound. Xiaohua was stunned, Reverend Yuan Qing was stunned, and Reverend Shangtian was also stunned. The magic treasures of the two nascent soul cultivators froze in midair. The ocelot was now locked in a stalemate with Si Hong and couldn't pay too much attention to it. However, the ocelot had also sensed Little Silver's attack, and its body immediately emitted a layer of earthy yellow light. This light was surrounded by wisps of demon fog, and its brocade fur stood straight up, each strand flashed with light. Swish! It was like a stubborn stone thrown into the water, and the ripples didn't seem to have the power to resist it. Little Silver pounced on the ocelot's back. Whether it was the defensive light, the sizzling demon fog, or the brocade fur, they couldn't resist Little Silver's bite at all. Little Silver's body sank into the ocelot's back. "A wool!" The ocelot cried out in pain. Before it could pull its mouth away from Si Hong's neck, there was a flash of silver light in front of its chest, and Little Silver actually flew out from there. As soon as Little Silver flew out, the ocelot immediately went limp in midair. Pa! There was a crisp sound as Si Hong's tail hit the ocelot's forehead. Its head was smashed to smithereens, and its entire body fell from midair. The whole process took only a few breaths. Not only was Reverend Yuan Qing in disbelief, even Xiaohua himself felt that it was a little inconceivable. "A wool!" Reverend Shangtian let out a roar similar to an ocelot's. The cold plum blossom flying sword shone brightly, and the pressure of a middle nascent soul cultivator soared into the sky from the top of Reverend Shangtian's head. Reverend Shangtian was furious. At that moment, Xiaohua's unhurried and cold voice rang out. "Animals fight among themselves. If someone disturbs us, don't blame this old man for not treating them as human beings." Seeing Reverend Shangtian's anger, Reverend Yuan Qing's heart turned cold. The small halberd magic treasure was about to rush into the air, but when he heard Xiaohua say the exact same thing as Reverend Shangtian, he couldn't help but laugh. "You brat!" Reverend Shangtian was even more furious, and he pounced on Xiaohua in fury. Reverend Shangtian had actually abandoned Reverend Yuan Qing and wanted to kill Xiaohua. As soon as Reverend Shangtian's pressure was released, it immediately stirred up the clouds, and the thick fog within a radius of several hundred feet was swept away. Xiaohua sneered, and with a flip of his hand, he was about to hit his own head. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Rumble! The space within a radius of more than 10 miles was filled with thunderbolts, and a thick righteous qi was generated from all directions, falling towards Taoist Xiangtian. An aura akin to the might of the heavens was born from this wave of awe-inspiring qi. Not only did it envelop Reverend Shangtian, but it also enveloped Xiaohua and Reverend Yuan Qing, as well as several tens of kilometers around them. Reverend Shangtian's pressure had triggered the restrictions of the defensive formation, but that wasn't the end of it. The thick fog within several tens of kilometers was dispersed by the awe-inspiring qi, revealing the true appearance of the defensive formation. Below Xiaohua and the others, icy ponds appeared one after another. Icy rivers that were as thin as palm prints also appeared. The dense fog actually came from the icy ponds and icy rivers. At this moment, there were still wisps of fog rushing into the air. Following the appearance of the defensive formation was a group of cultivators scattered around the glacial ponds and glacial ponds. There were at least a dozen of these cultivators, and aside from the nascent soul cultivator furthest away from Xiaohua and the others, the rest were all gold core cultivators. These cultivators' qi was affected by the awe-inspiring qi, and they had no choice but to release their pressure and magic treasures to resist with all their might. Some of the weaker ones were even knocked to the ground by the awe-inspiring qi. The thick fog dispersed, and Xiaohua and the others recovered their divine sense. With a sweep of their divine sense, the group of cultivators unconsciously focused their attention on a cliff at the edge of the space. They saw a ball of two-colored light flickering there, and even the divine sense of a nascent soul cultivator couldn't see it clearly. The aura of the strange treasure was coming from this ball of light. Xiao Hua and the others were some distance away from the strange treasure, but the other nascent soul cultivator wasn't too far away. Just as they discovered the strange treasure, the nascent soul cultivator's body turned into a rainbow, and he charged towards the strange treasure as fast as lightning, shattering the awe-inspiring chi along the way. Damn it! The culprit who triggered the defensive formation, Taoist soaring heaven, was furious and cursed. The flying sword in the air was too late to attack Xiao Hua, so it hurriedly turned around and flew towards the nascent soul cultivator like a blooming plum blossom. From the looks of it, it seemed like it wanted to snatch the strange treasure from the nascent soul cultivator. Damn it, this bastard. Isn't he just courting death? Xiao Hua's palm stopped in midair, and he couldn't help but ridicule Taoist soaring heaven, who was almost 20% faster than the nascent soul cultivator. Taoist Yuan Qing didn't dare to put away the small halberd. He pointed his finger, and the small halberd flew back to the top of his head to protect him. Then, he waved his sleeve and put away the heavily injured two-headed monster Si Hong. He coldly said, "Although we are mid-nascent soul cultivators, in this bastard's eyes, we are no different from early nascent soul cultivators. Not to mention the three of us, even if two more came, he would still be the same. Today, if we don't join forces to kill him, we won't be able to leave Yaodai Mountain. Even if we can avoid Taoist soaring heaven, we won't be able to escape fairy soaring foam." Xiao Hua faintly smiled and opened his hand. The happy little silver flew back into his palm. Its claws were still digging into its mouth, as if it had eaten its fill and was cleaning its mouth. Looking at little silver's body, there wasn't the slightest bit of blood or filth. "What do you think, fellow Taoist Xiao?" Seeing the mysterious smile on Xiao Hua's face, Taoist Yuan Qing couldn't figure out what Xiao Hua was thinking. He had no choice but to get straight to the point. Taoist soaring heaven's ocelot was indeed killed by Si Hong, but in the end, it was still killed by fellow Taoist's pet. "Oh, Taoist, I don't want to tie Taoist together with me. I am very happy that Taoist was able to take action at the critical moment. Since that's the case, let's kill him." Xiao Hua's expression didn't change, and he didn't explain anything. Taoist Yuan Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He cupped his hands and said, "Oh, Taoist Xiao, if it were that easy, would I have needed to say so much in front of you? If Taoist I really want it, then let's hurry over. This strange treasure, I don't want it anymore. I'll give it to that fellow Taoist in front of me. Of course, if Taoist wants it, then the three of us can join forces to kill him." -12. Chapter 3605. All right, let's do as Taoist Yuan Qing says. Xiao Hua nodded. He looked very relaxed, as if he was about to swat a mosquito. Taoist Yuan Qing wasn't as calm as Xiao Hua. He had heard of Fairy Xiang Feng's fame and felt that Xiao Hua was underestimating Taoist Xiang Tian. He wanted to say a few more words, but when he saw that Taoist Xiang Tian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator were about to approach, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly moved his halberd and chased after Taoist Xiang Tian. When Taoist Yuan Qing chased after him, there was a strange look in his eyes. However, Taoist Yuan Qing's figure had only moved a few hundred meters when suddenly, the sound of a pipa appeared in the air. This pipa sound was very strange. It was low and deep like raindrops, falling directly into people's hearts. Soon after, the raindrops became as big as a bucket and continued to crackle. After a few breaths of time, the pipa sound suddenly became louder. It was like an eagle striking the sky, producing the sound of a golden spear. Not good. The defensive formation has been activated. Not only Xiao Hua, but all the cultivators within a few dozen kilometers were awakened by the sound of the battle. Xiao Hua was especially shocked. The true qi in his chest was stirred up by the unspeakable pipa sound. In a trance, he seemed to see iron horses roaring from the ice river. The iron horses' hooves instantly crushed the space. Golden Spear Iron Horse. Xiao Hua calmed down and immediately stabilized his true qi. He couldn't help but think of Long Chinga's Golden Spear Iron Horse formation. Sure enough, as the sound of the pipa reverberated through the entire space, a vast amount of awe-inspiring qi rushed into the cold pond and the ice river. Countless battle intents and cold air rushed out from the ice river. Waves of inscriptions stirred in the ice river and the cold pond. Then, pairs of war horses rushed out from the ice river and the cold pond. See, Xiaohua, who had seen the 5 brocade cloud painting before, couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when his divine sense swept across these war horses. These war horses that were formed from ice were all soldiers and generals wearing ice armor. These soldiers and generals were surrounded by an incomparably noble and cold aura. Furthermore, the weapons in their hands seemed to be both tangible and intangible at the same time. The aura of these war horses was several times stronger than Long Chinga's golden spear iron horse formation. Moreover, there was an endless stream of cavalry emerging from the ice river. There seemed to be no end to it. Oh no! Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but worry for those golden core cultivators. 1 or 2 battle riders might not be able to catch the eye of a gold core cultivator, but 100 or 1,000 of them could definitely take the life of a gold core cultivator. Not to mention that many of these gold core cultivators were still resisting the heavenly might of the defensive formation. Xiaohua's worries were not superfluous. Not far from where Xiaohua's divine sense swept past, a Jindan cultivator who was doing his utmost to resist the heavenly might of the imperial formation saw several armored horses galloping on the ice river approaching. Immediately, his entire body flashed with a splendor, and a magic weapon that looked like a silver moon spat out from his mouth. The silver moon was like a blade, and when the splendor flew past, those armored horses were instantly shattered into pieces. The charging horses turned into ice and fell to the ground. However, without waiting for this gold core cultivator to catch his breath, another dozen or so ice spears emerged from the cold pond. Before he could even see the armored horses behind the ice spears, those ice spears shot towards the gold core cultivator like meteors. The gold core cultivator's figure slightly swayed, as if his pressure was shaken by the heavenly might of the formation. Soon after, his head also shook, and it seemed as if countless armored horses had appeared before his eyes. When the ice spears approached him, that cultivator let out a loud roar. The silver moon magic weapon flashed again, and the dozen or so ice spears were easily destroyed. Even when the magic weapon rushed into the ice river, it brought with it 10,000 drops of frost, and the armored horses that were unable to charge out were also destroyed in one strike. The gold core cultivator caught his breath, and thick clouds immediately appeared beneath his feet. The clouds carried the cultivator's body and flew straight into the air. However, after flying for several meters, whoosh, several ice spears shot out from the thick clouds beneath his feet. They very strangely stabbed towards the gold core cultivator's lower body. The gold core cultivator turned pale with fright. Only now did he understand that these weapons and armored horses could be produced from any kind of fog. Even his magic cloud technique was not spared. Fortunately, this gold core cultivator was alert enough. He had already realized that something was wrong. He hurriedly turned his body into the wind and used the Dao sect's flying technique to hastily dodge. Pu-pu-pu. Several muffled sounds rang out. Several spears were shattered, and the gold core cultivator was also pierced by 2 of the ice spears. However, the gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light. The ice spears only managed to pierce his defensive magic weapon, and they were broken again. Just as this gold core cultivator was still in shock, and his heart had just started to feel lucky, a clump of cold air once again strangely appeared a few feet in front of his head. This time, the gold core cultivator was prepared. He looked very calm. With a wave of his big sleeve, kacha-kacha, sounds rang out. Several Dao weapons broke on his iron-like Dao robe. Of course, there were still several ice spears that managed to slip through the net and hide outside of these relatively powerful divine abilities. The gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light again. Clearly, he wanted to block these ice spears. However, when the ice spears pierced the golden light, the gold core cultivator's complexion changed greatly. Without waiting for him to stir up his true essence again, or activate his silver moon magic weapon, one of the ice spears pierced his chest. The gold core cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream. His corporeal body floated down like a withered leaf. The ice spear that sneak attacked him just now like the other spears and halberds, sank into the cold air and disappeared without a trace. In just a short moment, the gold core cultivator controlling the formation was suppressed, his soul suppressed, his spirit attacked, and his life was taken away. The hundreds of years of hard work he had put into cultivating turned into flowing water. A strand of wandering soul calmly disappeared. Hiss! Xiao Hua could clearly see from high up in the sky that the killing ice spear was no different from the other ice spears. His divine sense was unable to distinguish it at all. Seeing the gold core cultivator fall so easily, Xiao Hua hastily opened his transcendence vision. With one glance, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because within the countless mist, there were actually many immortal weapons wielding ice spears that would occasionally appear from the fog of the defensive formation. After killing a gold core cultivator with one strike, they would immediately disappear into the formation. It was as if they were dragging mud and water. It was truly incomparably mysterious. Within this defensive formation, more than half of the gold core cultivators had already fallen in a short moment. The other gold core cultivators saw that the situation was far from good and hurriedly protected themselves with all their might. At the same time, they also used Dao sect flying techniques to get closer to Taoist Master Xiangtian and the other nascent soul cultivators, hoping to use this opportunity to escape. As for Taoist Master Xiangtian, how could he care about these gold core cultivators? Taoist Master Xiangtian's magic power surged all over his body and sword light shot out, sweeping everything in its path. All the ice spears and iron horses were cut down and unparalleled momentum rushed towards the treasure. At this moment, the nascent soul cultivators in the distance also felt Taoist Master Xiangtian's killing intent. They sped up, wanting to snatch the jade box before Taoist Master Xiangtian could. Of course, they didn't care about the sneak attacks of the immortal weapons around them. Damn it! Xiao Hua was inwardly annoyed by the ruthless methods of this Confucian cultivator. He cursed and urged his body to catch up to Taoist Master Yuanqing. Xiao Hua's speed was naturally far superior to Taoist Master Yuanqing's. Although he didn't use the lightning escape technique, he had already surpassed Taoist Master Yuanqing in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuanqing was stunned, but a smile appeared on his face. The stronger Xiao Hua was, the better it would be for him. The two of them would have more chances to kill Taoist Master Xiangtian if they joined hands. However, Taoist Master Yuanqing was puzzled because after Xiao Hua passed him, he didn't directly attack Taoist Master Xiangtian. He also didn't try to snatch the treasure. Instead, he flew down between him and Taoist Master Xiangtian. Xiao Hua waved his hands and shot out a series of incantations. The space within 1,000 feet of Taoist Master Yuanqing began to tremble rapidly. Strands of cold air were shattered, and the pillars of Taoist Master Yuanqing's qi were also destroyed. A golden light flashed and half of the golden scissors rushed into the air. Miserable screams sounded and several broken limbs wearing immortal armor fell into the fog in the distance. Too fierce. Taoist Master Yuanqing was flabbergasted. As the saying goes, when an expert shows his hand, you can tell whether he is an expert or not. Although this saying was very vulgar, it was very appropriate to use it on Xiao Hua. Taoist Master Yuanqing had overestimated Xiao Hua, but that overestimation was far from Xiao Hua's fierceness. Taoist Master Yuanqing was well aware of the limitations the defensive formation had on Dao sect cultivators. He could easily cast the confinement of 1,000 feet outside the Yaodai Mountain, but inside the defensive formation, it was already a miracle that he was able to confine a few thousand feet. Otherwise, he wouldn't have desperately chased after Taoist Master Xiangtian, and Taoist Master Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator wouldn't have had to desperately rush to the cliff where the treasure was. Normally, a nascent soul cultivator would be able to snatch the treasure within a dozen or so miles. Even if they used a flying technique, they would be able to snatch it in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuanqing was pleasantly surprised, and his expression changed once again. The magic power in Xiao Hua's body surged, and the safe area that Xiao Hua's magic power restricted was constantly expanding. The golden core cultivator next to the immortal soldier who had just been killed was already at the edge of the safe area. It wasn't until now that Taoist Master Yuanqing realized what Xiao Hua was thinking. He really didn't understand. After all, that golden core cultivator wasn't Wu Tian or Changyu. Of course, Xiao Hua's actions only made Taoist Master Yuan Qing respect him and trust him even more. He only urged his magic power to chase after Taoist Master Xiangtian, who was already close to the treasure. He didn't believe that Xiao Hua, who could save an ordinary golden core cultivator, wouldn't forget about him, a nascent soul cultivator that he had befriended. Rumble. At that moment, Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure collided. Countless waves of qi surged out, and the fog that had been dispersed by the pillars of qi began to wreak havoc once again. Although the defensive formation borrowed the power of the heavens and was extremely powerful, the collision between two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators still caused the formation to shake a few times. The dozens of pillars of qi were once again shattered. Not good. Perhaps the bystanders were surprised by the fierceness of the battle between the two nascent soul cultivators. But Xiao Hua inwardly cursed, because as the defensive formation trembled, even more cold air and armored horses were born from the void. The few Jindan cultivators who were lucky enough to survive had just seen the dawn of life, but in a short moment, they were submerged by these armored horses. The battle between two nascent soul cultivators had indirectly taken the lives of several golden core cultivators. -12. Chapter 3606. Seeing this, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. During the trip to Yaodai Mountain, Li Xiang had made it clear that they had to hide their strength and keep a low profile. Although Li Xiang might not have seen the immortal weapons hidden in the fog, he also knew that the Confucian cultivators would not easily let the Taoist cultivators go. Xiao Hua rashly wanted to save these Jindan cultivators and display his superhuman skills, but at this time, he really did not have the strength to do so. Several Jindan cultivators were scattered around the Great Formation. He had only used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen immortal weapons. Just as he was about to use his Yuanying hand to cover the nearest Jindan cultivator, there was a sound of surging waves. Countless ice currents flashing with an extremely cold aura appeared all around the Great Formation. One by one, ice cavalrymen, several zhang tall, strangely protruded from the ice currents. Streams of vast qi once again rumbled and poured into these ice cavalrymen. Streaks of azure light seeped out from these ice cavalrymen. The azure dragon saber that they wielded was more powerful than any magic tool. Cracks appeared in the void as it flashed out. Even the magic treasures of Jindan cultivators could not achieve such an effect. The Confucian cultivators had gradually released their means. When these ice cavalrymen appeared, the Jindan cultivators were all greatly shocked. Their faces were ashen, and their hearts were filled with despair. Previously, the iron glacier armor had already beaten them to a pulp. Now, the ice cavalrymen were several times more powerful than the iron glacier armor. The Jindan cultivator's fighting spirit was completely gone, especially the Jindan cultivator near Xiao Hua's confinement area. He completely gave up resisting and only wanted to be protected by Xiao Hua. After Xiao Hua used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen ice cavalrymen, he really could no longer take care of this cultivator who had lost all fighting spirit. The ice cavalryman suddenly thrust forward, and an ice spear that was 100 times colder than ice pierced deeply into his back. Even the Jindan cultivator who was about to self-destruct was suppressed by this coldness. His entire body turned into an ice sculpture and fell to the ground. Not only that, but these cold currents that were like the eruption of an icy river instantly appeared everywhere within the imperial formation that spanned dozens of kilometers. Ice spears that were comparable to Jindan stage cultivators strangely appeared from the void. Even within the space that Xiao Hua had just sealed, the powerful imperial formation's heavenly might tore apart the restriction inch by inch. At the places where the restriction was torn apart, strands of icy currents appeared like blood clots. Hundreds of ice spears appeared along with the appearance of the ice cavalry, and each ice spear stabbed towards Xiao Hua like flying swords. Xiao Hua had no time to care about himself, let alone the several Jindan stage cultivators. After the ice spear appeared, they all died in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. Reverend Xiang Tian and the nameless Yuanying, who were charging towards the ancient treasure, were surrounded by ice cavalry, just like Xiaohua. These ice cavalry blocked their path, and even with all sorts of divine abilities, they were unable to kill these ice cavalry. Xiaohua naturally had to resort to trickery. Although the Dharma eye between his eyebrows was not particularly obvious, it was still slightly open. After all, Confucian cultivators were very proficient in using deception tactics, so Xiaohua naturally could not be careless. Sure enough, after a dozen ice cavalry arrived, an immortal general that was several times stronger than the ice cavalry rushed out of the icy water with an ice cavalry in his hand. With a whistle, he stabbed towards Xiaohua like the other ice cavalry. Unfortunately, although this immortal general did not show his face, his filthy thoughts could not be exposed to the light of day. Xiaohua also did not seem to notice. He casually waved his Taoist robe and scattered most of the ice spears. A few ice cavalry powerlessly pierced the golden light, protecting Xiaohua's body. Seeing the ice spears pierce Xiaohua's armpits, the immortal general raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was happy. Unfortunately, his eyebrows seemed to have stopped there and could no longer be raised. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly shook his hand, and a wishful staff appeared in his hand. The wishful staff whistled through the air, flashing past the ice spears and smashing into the immortal general's head. The immortal general did not understand how he had died under Xiaohua's hands. This staff was too strange. No one would have imagined it. When Xiaohua encountered such an obstruction, there was no need to mention Taoist Xiangtian, Taoist Yuanqing, and the nameless nascent soul cultivator. There were even more cold currents near the strange treasure. Before Taoist Yuanqing could catch up to Taoist Xiangtian, he was blocked by many ice cavalry and had no choice but to use his small halberd to meet them. The ice cavalry and ice spears might be the appetizer for these nascent soul cultivators, but the immortal general hidden among the ice cavalry was the appetizer. Several times, the three nascent soul cultivators were almost stabbed by the immortal general. How could the three nascent soul cultivators not know that something was wrong? Reverend Xiangtian hurriedly slapped his hand on the door above him, causing a cluster of green light to shoot up into the air. The green light transformed into countless sword lights that rained down like a fountain, enveloping the space several hundred feet around Reverend Xiangtian. These sword lights were filled with sword shadows and chilling in tint. They strangled the ice river and frost inch by inch, not allowing the ice cavalry to appear again. Reverend Xiangtian did the same. Reverend Yuanqing and the nameless nascent soul cultivator did the same. One of them unleashed a water-colored light that looked like a boat in the ocean to protect himself, while the other condensed a huge, spindle-shaped magic treasure to shield himself. Neither the ice spears nor the cavalry could break through their defense. Seeing the few gold core cultivators inside the defensive formation fall into the ice river one after another, Xiaohua sighed and withdrew his magic power. He used his divine sense to urge the soaring dragon shears to sweep away the ice spears and ice cavalry that came out of the ice river. The wishful staff in his hand also danced and flew toward Taoist Xiangtian and the others. For a moment, the entire defensive formation was in a stalemate with the four nascent soul cultivators. Although there were still dozens of ice rivers within the defensive formation, the ice rivers seemed to be helpless against the defenses of the four nascent soul cultivators. Seeing that the previous defense was effective, Taoist Xiangtian immediately urged his flying sword to rush toward the treasure while the nameless nascent soul cultivator used his nascent soul hand to grab the treasure. Seeing this, Taoist Master Yuanqing knew that this was an excellent opportunity. Almost without hesitation, he activated the small halberd. Streaks of crystalline thunderbolts flashed in the air, shattering countless ice spears. Like the nameless nascent soul attacking Taoist Master Xiangtian from both sides, the halberd fell towards Taoist Master Xiangtian's back. "You dare!" Taoist Xiangtian coldly smiled and pointed his finger at the flying sword. The flying sword let out a whistling sound and instantly grew in size. It was originally flying toward the treasure, but it strangely changed direction and directly chopped toward the nameless nascent soul's nascent soul hand. Moreover, the momentum of this change was as heavy as a mountain, as if Taoist Xiangtian had already planned for this. The nameless nascent soul's expression changed slightly. He knew that this was a diversion tactic, but at this point, The nameless nascent soul had no choice but to face it head-on. Looking at the smug expression on Reverend Xiang Tian's face, he opened his mouth slightly. Web? He spat out a mouthful of clear air, and a cauldron the size of a thumb flew into the air. Following his chanting, a dozen huge pillars of origin energy rose from the mouth of the cauldron and landed on the cauldron with a sound no less powerful than that of the pillars of origin energy. Wong. After the cauldron received the origin energy pillars, it shined brightly like a meteor and blocked the small halberd that was about to transform into a dragon. Rumble. In an instant, Taoist Xiangtian used his flying sword to split open the nameless nascent soul's nascent soul hand and the cauldron to block Taoist Yuanqing's small halberd magic treasure. With a loud sound, the entire defensive formation violently trembled. Whether it was the ice river or the mist, they were all violently tumbling, causing Taoist Yuanqing to feel extremely bitter. Although he had overestimated Taoist Xiangtian, this overestimation was not enough. They were both mid-stage nascent soul cultivators, but Taoist Xiangtian was able to fight against two of them with ease. Taoist Yuanqing didn't know what the nameless nascent soul cultivator was feeling. He only knew that his qi and blood were surging and the magic power in his body was tumbling like the ice river. A sharp sound seemed to be coming from his ears. Along with this sound, the sound of the pipa in the defensive formation reached its peak and soared into the sky. I can't let Taoist Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator join forces. I must join forces with Xiaohua to kill Taoist Xiangtian. This was the only thought in Taoist Yuanqing's mind. At the same time, he didn't care too much. While urging his magic power, his halberd flashed with an unusually strong brilliance. He desperately rushed towards Taoist Xiangtian's cauldron. At the same time, he transmitted his voice to Xiaohua, preparing to join forces with them to attack. However, the mist and ice river in the defensive formation were tumbling madly. The sound was loud and chaotic, and the noble qi was like a giant python that was slithering chaotically. Taoist Yuanqing was unable to transmit his voice. Oh no! Taoist Yuanqing's heart suddenly shuddered, and he had an ominous feeling. As soon as this feeling appeared, the entire defensive formation suddenly fell silent. All the sounds of the pipa, the river of ice, and the roaring of the vast pillar of qi strangely disappeared, like the waning of the night. In this moment of extreme silence, Taoist Xiangtian's cold plum blossom flying sword rushed out of the ice river and once again turned into a big plum blossom hand to grab the strange treasure on the cliff. Damn it! The big hand only rose a few feet, but Xiaohua's angry voice was heard. The entire defensive formation was filled with the sound of thunder. Xiaohua turned into a bolt of lightning and streaked across the sky, pouncing towards Taoist Xiangtian's big plum blossom hand to stop him. Woo! In the midst of the thunder, a wisp of flute sound came from an unknown place. Although it was clear, it was extremely penetrating, and Xiaohua's thunder was unable to cover it. Along with this flute sound, the entire defensive formation was suddenly filled with a burst of weak wind from all over. When Taoist Xiangtian saw Xiaohua using the thunder escape technique, he was shocked. He pointed his finger at the cauldron and dodged Taoist Yuanqing's halberd, which suddenly grew several times larger and fell towards Xiaohua's head. Although Xiaohua's thunder escape technique was extremely fast, the cauldron produced a huge suction force, and he had to pass through it. Xiaohua sneered and waved the wishful staff in his hand. In the eyes of Taoist Xiangtian, the wishful staff inconceivably grew longer and bigger and hit the cauldron. The cauldron was no longer under Taoist Xiangtian's control and began to tumble in the air. -12. Chapter 3608. Taoist Xiangtian. Xiaohua waved the wishful staff and shouted angrily, "Can't you see? Every time you fight someone, you cause a change in the defensive formation, and each change is stronger than the last. You've already caused more than 10 golden core cultivators to die in the defensive formation. Do you want to drag us down with you?" Xiaohua's voice was extremely loud. It sounded like a thunderclap inside the defensive formation. When Reverend Yuanqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel shaken. He was immediately stunned. How could this Xiaohua possibly speak inside the defensive formation? Taoist Xiao, Taoist Yuanqing hastily said, but as he thought, even though his voice contained magic power, it still couldn't reach far. It was at this moment that the flute sound in the defense formation suddenly became sharp. The weak wind that was generated earlier suddenly intensified. The weak wind was more powerful than any magic weapon. When it blew on immortal Yuanqing's body, the golden light that protected his body was extinguished in a visible manner. Not only that, but the light on Minghao's halberd was also flickering rapidly. A feeling of friction between the halberd and the sand was transmitted from Minghao's halberd. Even the magic treasure couldn't withstand the weak wind of the defensive array. Not good. Taoist Yuanqing's expression changed, and he opened his mouth. A blue bead rushed into the air, and a watery brilliance fell, completely covering Taoist Yuanqing. In the weak wind, a string of small bubbles appeared on the surface of the light. The bubbles popped and popped like boiling water. Even though the water bead couldn't completely resist the weak wind, Taoist Yuanqing let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out to grab Minghao's halberd, but when he tried to use his magic power, the weak wind blocked his magic power. Minghao's halberd flashed a few times, and like a wanderer unwilling to turn back, it only struggled to return several feet. Taoist Yuanqing had no choice but to use his flying light to fly in the direction of Minghao's halberd. At this moment, the expressions of Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless cultivator changed slightly. Reverend Xiangtian was shocked by Xiao Hua's divine ability and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. In the end, Reverend Xiangtian didn't dare to act rashly and recalled the cold plum blossom flying sword and the cauldron. In just a moment, half of the cold plum blossom flying sword had been blown away by the wind, causing Reverend Xiangtian to be shocked. The nameless cultivator seemed to have been prepared for this. Seeing his magic weapon being corroded by the weak wind, he didn't seem surprised, but when he heard Xiao Hua's voice, he was greatly alarmed. He opened his mouth and a pale white bead flew into the air. The bead's brilliance didn't cover a large area, only a few dozen feet in size, but within this area, not a single weak wind could be produced. Air frozen bead? Reverend Xiangtian's eyes lit up. The flying sword seemed to be greedy, and it shrank a few times in the air before returning to his hand. This was because at this moment, Xiao Hua, who Reverend Xiangtian was most unsure of, had arrived. Although the golden light around Xiao Hua's body flickered slightly in the wind, as if it was being eroded by the wind, Xiao Hua's flying speed was much faster than before. Although it couldn't compare to the lightning evasion technique, in the eyes of Reverend Xiangtian, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. After all, Xiao Hua was his enemy and not his friend. All of you, stop. After several changes in the defensive formation, Xiao Hua was finally able to say these words in front of the two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators. If anyone dares to act rashly again, this Xiao will immediately kill them. With that, Xiao Hua's eyes swept over Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless cultivator like lightning. Reverend Xiangtian flew into a rage, and the flying sword in his hand flew into the air again. His previous misgivings were thrown far away as he loudly shouted, "Brat, what qualifications do you have to order this old man around? What divine ability do you have to kill this old man? What if I join in?" The nameless cultivator's eyes twitched in the face of Xiao Hua's fierce expression. When he heard Reverend Xiangtian's challenge, his eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. He raised his hand, and a small drumstick that he had put away earlier shined with a yellow light. "Join and I." Reverend Yuanqing finally arrived and said with a smile, Minghao's halberd in his hand, "Humph." Reverend Xiangtian coldly snorted and said, "Even if it's the three of you, do you think this old man will be afraid of you?" However, although Reverend Xiangtian's voice was fierce, the flying sword in his hand didn't fly out. Xiao Hua coldly smiled and said, "I don't know if you're afraid or not. What I do know is that if you don't cooperate with the three of us, not to mention the treasures on the cliff, even your life will be lost." With that said, Xiao Hua pointed to the left and sternly shouted, "Take a look. The defensive formation is filled with weak winds and glaciers. There are also immortal soldiers and immortal generals hidden inside. Don't tell me you don't know the existence of these immortal generals and how powerful they are." A few golden core cultivators won't be able to fight back in front of them. Even nascent soul cultivators like us won't be able to escape if they surround us. Reverend Shangtian's words were still unyielding. That's what you think. This old man naturally has his own divine ability. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You're just using the excuse of cooperation to prevent this old man from obtaining the treasures. Xiao Hua ignored Reverend Shangtian and turned to the nameless cultivator. He cupped his hands and said, I am Xiao Hua of Black Cloud Mountain. How should I address you, fellow Taoist? The nameless cultivator smiled and said, I am Su Tingzi of the Jingxi Mountain Villa. Good. Xiao Hua nodded and asked, fellow Taoist Su Tingzi, do you wish to sign with the Imperial Teacher? The Imperial Teacher sign? Su Tingzi smiled. I don't need it. Yes. Xiao Hua nodded and smiled. I need the Imperial Teacher sign. Since fellow Taoist needs different things, we should be able to work together. As you wish. Su Tingzi was even more delighted. Your wish is my wish. Reverend Shangtian. Xiao Hua glanced at Reverend Shangtian. Do you want to oppose the three of us? So what if I oppose you? So what if I don't oppose you? Reverend Shangtian looked around and saw that the weak wind had already started to condense. These strands of weak wind gradually turned into hurricanes. When these weak winds converged into hurricanes, even a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator like him wouldn't be able to deal with them. He had no choice but to find a way out of this situation. I won't talk about the consequences of opposing you, Xiao Hua said indifferently. If you want to work together, then let's put aside our grudges for the time being. As for the strange treasure on the cliff, let's put it aside for the time being. We'll first work together to protect ourselves and use our divine abilities to break this defensive formation. Haha. Xiao Hua, are you joking? Reverend Shangtian didn't wait for Xiao Hua to finish speaking and laughed loudly. Break this defensive formation? Do you know what this defensive formation is? How dare you talk about breaking it so arrogantly? Xiao Hua slightly frowned and said indifferently, since it's a formation, it can be broken regardless of whether it's a Taoist formation or a Confucian formation. I don't think there's anything wrong with what I said. Reverend Shangtian coldly snorted. The ignorant are truly fearless. Let this old man tell you. Although this old man doesn't know what this imperial formation is, seeing that it can injure both you and me, this imperial formation must be one of the famous 28-star sovereign imperial formations of the Jade Pavilion Conference. In the past, the cultivators who participated in the Jade Pavilion Conference were able to walk out of this defensive formation and obtain the Imperial Teacher's sign. There was no need to go through any selection. I've never heard of the 28-star monarch defensive formations being broken. Let's hear Reverend Xiao out. Reverend Yuanqing said coldly. You and I might not be able to break this defensive formation, but it's still possible for us to protect ourselves and obtain the strange treasure inside the defensive formation. That's right. Xiao Hua took advantage of the situation and said, we'll first work together to protect ourselves and then obtain the strange treasure together. If it's the Imperial Teacher's sign, then I'll thank you three fellow Taoists. If it's not the Imperial Teacher's sign, then after we escape from the defensive formation, you three will discuss how to divide it. Who's going to take the strange treasure? Reverend Shangtian asked straightforwardly. Xiao Hua said proudly, naturally, it's me. Why is it you and not me? Reverend Shangtian was immediately dissatisfied. Because I'm Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked at Reverend Shangtian and said word by word. Reverend Yuanqing clapped his hands. I agree. What about you? Fellow Taoist Su Tingzi. Xiao Hua looked at Su Tingzi. Su Tingzi pondered for a moment. He looked at Reverend Yuanqing and then at his air-frozen bead, which had already begun to waver. He couldn't help but say tentatively, I'm afraid this air-frozen bead won't be able to last for long. If Reverend Xiao has the means to protect us while we head to the place where the strange treasure is, then I'll agree for fellow Taoists to take it. Yes, I'll naturally agree to this. As Xiao Hua spoke, he waved his hand and the weak water bead flew into the air. As soon as the weak water bead flew out, puffs of weak water fell down and formed a water curtain of varying density that protected the four of them. The dense weak water blocked the weak wind. Although the weak wind was able to pass through the sparse weak water, Reverend Yuanqing and the others could see through the sparse weak water. The weak wind that passed through the sparse weak water couldn't threaten the safety of the four of them. Good. I'll listen to Reverend Zhao's arrangement. Su Tingzi was overjoyed and hastily put away the air-frozen bead. Reverend Xiangtian looked at the weak water bead above Xiao Hua's head, and his eyes flickered. The current situation had already been decided. If he didn't agree to Xiao Hua's request, then Xiao Hua would definitely make a move. Reverend Xiangtian had the strength to fight against Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi, but now that Xiao Hua's strength was unfathomable, Reverend Xiangtian pondered for a moment and said indifferently, "Given the current situation, do I still have a choice? Let's go." Seeing that Reverend Xiangtian didn't object, Xiao Hua didn't beat around the bush. He pointed at the weak water bead and flew toward the cliff. Reverend Xiangtian was even faster than Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi. His body swayed and landed on Xiao Hua's left hand. He was within the range of the weak water bead and maintained a sufficient distance from Xiao Hua. Reverend Yuanqing wasn't in a hurry. He raised his hand slightly and signaled Su Tingzi to fly in front while he followed Xiao Hua behind. -13. Chapter 3609. Rumble. Innumerable pillars of weak wind raged within the defensive array, as though they were going to tear the entire space apart. The pillars of wind hit the weak water, causing the water curtain of the weak water to shake violently, and a lot of weak wind rushed into it. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Su Tingzi didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly took out the air-frozen pearl. Under the pale white brilliance, the weak wind weakened by 60%. The weakened weak wind naturally couldn't threaten the four nascent soul cultivators. Immortal Yuanqing stole a glance at the weak wind storm outside the brilliance and trembled in his heart. He knew very well that if it weren't for Xiao Hua and Su Tingzi, he would have some means to deal with the weak wind. However, after using these means, his strength would be greatly reduced. Not to mention snatching the rare treasure, he might not even be able to escape from this defensive formation. The most likely outcome was that he would die in the formation of one of the 28 celestial lords. This, Immortal Yuanqing was greatly astonished and muttered to himself, "It seems that the previous Jadestige gathering wasn't like this? Why is this year's Jadestige gathering so strange?" Unfortunately, there were only unexpected things in this world, but there was nothing that others could not achieve. Just as Reverend Yuanqing thought he was lucky, a series of crackling noises that sounded like thunderclaps were heard from the sky above the defensive formation. Streams of icy rivers that were several times stronger than before poured down in torrents. Weak gusts of wind crashed into the icy rivers, and soldiers that were tens of feet tall and even hundreds of feet tall gushed out. These soldiers were either roaring barefooted or riding on horseback while brandishing their spears as they charged toward the four men along with the icy rivers. "Watch this old man's technique." Immortal Xiangtian roared and waved his arms. The flying sword in his left hand turned into a cold plum and rushed out of the air-frozen pearl's brilliance to protect the weak water pearl. The cold plum slightly rotated, and the sword rays emitted a glaring brilliance. Immortal Xiangtian's right hand let out a roar from the cauldron. Samadhi true fire flew out from the cauldron and formed a layer of fire shield around the cold plum sword rays. Xiao Hua's weak water droplet could only block the weak wind. It could not block the condensed ice river soldiers. When the valiant soldiers rushed into the weak water droplet, they were immediately killed by the Samadhi true fire. They either turned into the weak wind, or turned into the ice river and fell down. Even if there were some that were not killed by the Samadhi true fire, the cold plum blossom sword light behind it could also kill them. Immortal Xiangtian really lives up to his reputation. Xiao Hua understood and nodded his head inwardly. He also understood that there must be something else in Reverend Xiangtian's Samadhi true fire. Although Xiao Hua didn't mention how the treasures would be distributed after obtaining the Imperial Tutor's lot, it was clear that if one didn't contribute, they wouldn't have the qualifications to obtain the treasures. Once Taoist Xiangtian revealed his two treasures, Su Tingzi and Taoist Yuanqing immediately paled in comparison. Taoist Xiangtian couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Of course, Immortal Yuanqing wouldn't agree. He waved his hand and was about to use the halberd when Xiao Hua sneered and said, "Immortal Yuanqing, about 10 feet away from your left hand, attack with all your strength." Immortal Yuan Qing was stunned. However, he didn't dare to be careless. He circulated all the magic energy in his body, and the immortal halberd in his hand roared. It turned into a blue dragon and pounced towards the area 10 feet away from him. That was where the weak wind and the ice river had just appeared. Boom! Before the immortal halberd reached the ice river, the space around him was covered by the halberd's aura. Kacha, kacha, sounds came from the ice river. When the dragon pounced into the ice river, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Immortal general wearing immortal armor fell out of his chest with a bloody hole. The immortal general's face was filled with disbelief. Sii. Immortal Yuan Qing sucked in a breath of cold air, let alone immortal Shangtian and Su Tingzi. This was an immortal general, a Confucian cultivator with 4th-grade origin energy. His strength was comparable to an early nascent soul cultivator. Even though he was hiding in the defensive formation, he was still seen through by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's words about breaking the formation were not just empty words. 30 feet above your head. Xiao Hua shouted again. Immortal Yuan Qing no longer had any doubts. The immortal halberd once again soared into the sky. Another blood-curdling scream was heard. The second immortal general was killed on the spot. Too powerful. Immortal Yuan Qing was full of admiration for Xiao Hua. Su Tingzi, 20 feet ahead. Xiao Hua shouted again. Su Tingzi's face lit up with joy. The small drumstick in his hand flew out. Woo! A clear sound came from the drumstick. A yellow light condensed into a sharp arrow and disappeared into the void. When it reappeared, it was already 20 feet away from the weak wind. As the three expected, the corpse of a decapitated immortal general appeared again. Go! Xiao Hua ordered again. The three hurriedly used their flying techniques and followed Xiao Hua for several hundred feet. Kill! Following Xiao Hua's orders, close to 10 immortal generals were forced out of the defensive formation. Of course, these 10 immortal generals were not killed. Among them, were only seriously injured. Then, they borrowed the power of the defensive formation to escape. After these 4 immortal generals escaped, the entire defensive formation became a little quieter. No other immortal generals flew out to kill them. Without the immortal generals blocking them, the 4 arrived at the bottom of the cliff in a short while. The light of the strange treasure above their heads could be seen clearly. It was a square jade box. Let's fly over. Immortal Yuan Qing, take it. Xiao Hua did not wait for the 3 to say anything. He immediately ordered then, I will take care of it. Okay. Immortal Yuan Qing did not hesitate. He urged his body to fly up with Xiao Hua. However, as the 4 approached the cliff, Immortal Yuan Qing was about to reach out his hand. Rumble. The entire defensive formation let out a loud rumble. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. All the sounds of the flute, the river of ice, and the army were drowned out. In front of Xiao Hua and the others, the entire cliff was shaking. With this shaking, the cliff rapidly retreated. Even the weak wind, the river of ice, and the sound of the flute disappeared in the shaking. What? What is going on? Immortal Yuan Qing was shocked. His hand unconsciously froze. Looking at the jade box within reach, Immortal Yuan Qing involuntarily used his divine ability. A large hand came out of his sleeve and streaked across the sky, chasing after the fleeing cliff. The nascent soul hand can be used. Divine sense can be used as well. Immortal Yuan Qing was overjoyed. After a sweep of his divine sense, he exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, the halberd of Ming Hao flew out and flew toward the cliff in the distance. Yes, divine sense can be used. Immortal Xiang Tian was also overjoyed. However, he immediately cried out, not good. This defensive formation seems to have expanded a lot. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, a slightly hoarse voice called out from the distant horizon, where is this? Io, is this a rare treasure? Let's see who dares to snatch it from this old man. Before the voice fell, a large hand that was several times larger than Immortal Yuan Qing's nascent soul hand streaked across the sky. Following the large hand was a magic treasure that was not inferior to Ming Hao's halberd. It released a powerful aura and fell toward the cliff, A rare treasure? Who dares to snatch it from me? Immediately after, an extremely arrogant voice came from the other side. Another large hand appeared in the sky. Xiao Hua's soul had already swept through the entire defensive formation. Just as Immortal Xiang Tian had said, the defensive formation had expanded by several times. Within this expanded range, there were more than 20 nascent soul cultivators and hundreds of gold core cultivators. There were far more cultivators than the ones who had fallen into the defensive formation before. There was no need to think too much about it. Xiao Hua already understood that the Star Monarch defense array that these cultivators had fallen into earlier was definitely not the Star Monarch defense array. This Star Monarch defense array must have connected several or even dozens of other defense arrays together. Either it wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop, or it wanted to take advantage of the situation. However, regardless of what the people of Celestial Lord Hall were planning, Xiao Hua's plan had failed. Reverend Xiangtian had already taken out 2 more magic treasures and used his nascent soul hand to snatch the jade box from Reverend Yuanqing and the others. Reverend Yuanqing, who was not far away, saw that his divine ability was inferior to the others and called out, "Reverend Xiao, quickly give this poor Taoist a hand." Xiao Hua frowned. He felt that Immortal Yuanqing's call was a bit abrupt, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, he was the one who had come up with the plan. It was normal for Immortal Yuanqing to ask for help if he couldn't get the jade box. Thus, Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and the nascent soul hand immediately rushed out and grabbed towards the cliff. Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was much larger than the others, and its speed was also much faster. However, just as he was halfway there, the nascent soul hands that rushed out earlier felt that they were not as fast as Xiao Hua. Immediately, there was a rumbling sound as they all flipped their hands at the same time. Several nascent soul hands grabbed at Xiao Hua's large hand. Seeing that Taoist Yuanqing's hand was still in the lead, Xiao Hua understood Taoist Yuanqing's intention. With a flip of his hand expanded once again, tightly grabbing the hands of several nascent soul cultivators. Gotcha! The entire space trembled. Xiao Hua's giant hand shook a few times and tore apart the other nascent soul cultivators' giant hands. Only when the several giant hands slowly disappeared did Xiao Hua's giant hand collapse with a loud bang. Everyone turned pale with fright and looked at each other. At this moment, a deafening sound of a flute rang out above everyone's heads. The sound of wind and water appeared again. What made everyone tremble with fear was that a 3-colored giant python fell from the sky with an indescribable majesty along with the sound of the flute. The 3-colored majesty filled the entire defensive formation. Whether it was the cauldron, the flying sword, or the Hongming halberd, they all paled in comparison. Immortal Xiang Tian turned pale with fright. His heart trembled as he whispered, 28th Star Lord? -13. Chapter 36:10. Just as Taoist Xiangtian let out a low cry, the 3-colored giant python had already landed on Xiao Hua's back. Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand had just collapsed, so he simply didn't have the time to use a divine ability to resist. Boom! The giant python pierced Xiao Hua's back, revealing a bowl-shaped spear. Poof! Xiao Hua seemed to have been struck by lightning, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body trembled a few times on the spear before slowly falling down, and his arm powerlessly drooped down. Taoist Xiao. Taoist Yuanqing raised his eyebrows. The appearance of this long spear was really unexpected. Seeing that Xiao Hua was seriously injured, Taoist Yuanqing seemed to have thought of something. He cried out in alarm and stopped. That huge hand that was rushing towards the sky and the halberd that was following closely behind also restrained its brilliance and carefully stopped in midair. The spear that had injured Xiao Hua paused for a moment beside Xiao Hua, as if it was hesitating. Then, it turned back into a python and flew back into the sky. The pressure that caused all the nascent soul cultivators to tremble disappeared without a trace. Humph! Taoist Xiangtian let out a cold snort, and the giant hand that had stopped moved once again. While the nascent soul cultivators were hesitating, it immediately rushed forward. Taoist Xiangtian turned into a rainbow, and the cold plum blossom flying sword let out a thunderous roar as it protected him. It was as if he wasn't afraid of being killed by the celestial monarch. Xiaohua. Taoist Yuan Qing stood in the air and scanned Xiaohua's body with his divine sense. He frowned as if he was hesitating, but only for a moment. Taoist Yuan Qing also turned into a rainbow, and the halberd shined brightly. With a thunderous roar, a ferocious dragon shape appeared once again. However, this dragon shape didn't chase after Taoist Yuan Qing. Instead, it waited in the air until Taoist Yuan Qing flew past it before charging into Taoist Yuan Qing's golden light shield. Su Tingzi was originally in a daze, but when he saw Taoist Yuan Qing also abandon Xiaohua, he immediately understood. The reason the celestial official in charge of the defensive formation killed Xiaohua was not because Xiaohua wanted to snatch the rare treasure. The rare treasure of the defensive formation was something that should be snatched. Instead, it was because Xiaohua and the other three had killed the immortal general controlling the formation. Or perhaps it could be said that because of Xiaohua's existence, the four people who should have been fighting fiercely did not fight to the death. Instead, they formed a rope. Although they did not have the strength to break through the defensive formation, they still made the star venerates guarding the formation feel afraid, which was why they attacked. Sigh. Su Tingzi looked at where Xiaohua had landed and wanted to help. However, he didn't dare to offend the star monarch controlling the array. After all, the star monarch guarding the array was a fifth-stage origin Qi realm cultivator. He was far from being a match for him. However, Su Tingzi sighed. He knew that he no longer had the advantage of being the first to enter the array. At this moment, even the other nascent soul cultivators who had just entered the array were stronger than him, let alone Sage Xiangtian. He could only look for other opportunities. As a result, Su Tingzi decided not to snatch the treasure. Instead, he released his divine sense and carefully observed the movements of the defensive formation. He wanted to find an opportunity to escape from the defensive formation. Moreover, Su Tingzi was selfish. He wasn't too far away from where Xiaohua had landed. When the defensive formation was in chaos, he wanted to see if he could bring the heavily injured Xiaohua along with him. Of course, this was only a trace of kindness. Su Tingzi didn't know if the Star Monarch, controlling the formation, would let Xiaohua go. Taoist Yuan Qing and Sage Xiangtian moved. Whether it was their nascent soul cultivators or their escape techniques, they immediately alerted the other nascent soul cultivators. In the beginning, the other cultivators were naturally puzzled. They thought that the two of them were not afraid of death and dared to oppose the Star Monarch guarding the formation. However, when they saw that the two of them were getting closer and closer to the treasure and that murderous tricolored python spear had yet to appear, how could they still hold themselves back? Damn it! A nascent soul mid-stage cultivator angrily cursed. He opened his mouth and a magic treasure that looked like a string of beads rushed into the air. Then, the entire string of beads exploded. As the cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood essence on it, the beads transformed into sinister skulls. They let out soul-stirring screeches in the air and rushed towards the treasure as fast as lightning. Another cultivator slapped his forehead. A very delicate crane emerged from the top of his head. It let out a soft cry in the air and flapped its wings before falling into the void. When it reappeared, it was already 300 meters away. There were even several nascent soul cultivators who let out loud roars. Magic power surged around their bodies, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth madly poured into them. They either flickered with golden light or faintly glowed with green light. There was even one who had a demonic body. Feeling that they could not stop others from obtaining the treasure, the cultivators prepared to intercept Sage Xiangtian or Taoist Yuan Qing from all directions. However, the cultivator who had a demonic body was a strange winged demonic body. When he spread his wings, his flight was equally astonishing. He joined the ranks of the cultivators who fought for the treasure. The nascent soul cultivators within the defensive formation each used their own methods to fight for the treasure. How could the 100 or so golden core cultivators who were swept into the defensive formation dare to approach? They did not even have the intention to take advantage of the situation like Su Tingzi. They only trembled as they descended. They were prepared to find some spiritual herbs and other items within the defensive formation. Otherwise, they would wait in a safe place and escape when a flaw appeared in the defensive formation. The nascent soul cultivator with the demonic body seemed to be the fastest. In just a few breaths, he had already caught up to the hand of a nascent soul cultivator. How could the hand let him go? The hand whistled and grabbed at the air, wanting to stop the cultivator. Kaka! The nascent soul cultivator let out a long laugh. He did not use any other abilities. Instead, he flapped his wings and charged toward the hand. Rumble! A loud sound echoed through the defensive formation once more. A large hole was created in the hand of the nascent soul cultivator. The nascent soul cultivator's demonic body staggered and was about to fly back into the sky. However, at that moment, a ray of light appeared. It was an unknown nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure that blocked the path of the nascent soul cultivator. Pa! Just as the ray of light appeared, it immediately turned into a 5-colored screen and covered the nascent soul cultivator before the nascent soul cultivator could see it clearly. Not only that, but right after the loud noise, the entire defensive formation shook again. The life-threatening sound of the peeper rang out, and the Ice River iron horses broke free from their reins. This formation was even stranger than the one Xiaohua and the others had encountered before. After the sound of the pipa, the sound of the whistle also rang out. The weak wind and the dense fog coexisted, and there was a sense of harmony between the zither and the zither. Kill! Battle cries rang out from the omnipresent cavalry. The already chaotic defensive formation became even more chaotic as battle cries shook the heavens. Damn it! Seeing that his head was blocked by the 5-colored light and that there was a dazzling light coming toward him, the nascent soul cultivator was furious. Blue light appeared around his body like a wave, and a dragon horn gradually appeared on his forehead. The moment the horn appeared, his aura increased and his wings expanded even more. He flapped his wings and his demonic body charged toward the light like a meteor. He wanted to break this magic treasure just like he had broken through the nascent soul cultivator's hand. However, he didn't notice that a weak wind was quietly blowing above his head. Puff! The nascent soul crashed into the countless screens of light. The screens of light closed up like a peacock folding its wings. However, in front of the screens of light, a ray of blue light shot out like a sharp thorn. Boom! The space several dozen feet around him shook. The magic treasure was actually shattered by the nascent soul cultivator's nascent soul cultivator. Puff! In the distance, a short nascent soul cultivator's expression changed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was clear that his life source magic treasure had been destroyed, and he had suffered a lot of damage. However, before he could take out a healing pill from his Chinkuan bag, he heard a burst of ear-piercing pipa music below him. A dozen ice spears suddenly pierced toward him, scaring the cultivator into hastily forming hand seals. A light as large as a mountain smashed down and blocked the ice spears. Whoosh! Immediately after, a weak wind blew and a sizzling sound could be heard. The short cultivator's already somewhat dim protective light was blown out even more. Not good. The short cultivator grew alert and hastily slapped his forehead. A 5-meter-tall nascent soul appeared with a broken fan in its hand. However, there was a trace of golden blood at the corner of the nascent soul's mouth and its face was dispirited. Shwa! The moment the nascent soul appeared, it immediately rubbed its hands and the fan fell. The 5-colored light was about to cover the cultivator's body once more. Unfortunately, just as the 5-colored brilliance swept past the cultivator's neck, an iron spear emerged from the wind and mysteriously pierced the cultivator's back. Ayo! The small nascent soul let out a roar. It was clearly extremely angry. It reached out, and a blood-red restriction smashed down like thunder. Boom! After a loud bang, the iron spear broke in half and was thrown into the air. A mouthful of blood came out of the wind, but when the wind blew by, everything disappeared. Damn it! The nascent soul helplessly looked at its lifeless body and the large hole in its back. It let out a sharp curse, then light surged around its body, and it was about to fly away. Just at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Woo! A dense fog appeared. It was several times more dense than anywhere else. Along with this dense fog, an aura that could even suffocate a grade 5 origin energy cultivator came out from the nascent soul's body. A pillar of boundless chi that was even more solid than the nascent soul's hand covered the nascent soul. Gigi, the nascent soul was shocked. As it screamed, it spat out several mouthfuls of blood, which turned into extremely bright symbols. The symbols disappeared into the nascent soul's body. The nascent soul's body disappeared in the blink of an eye. This nascent soul wanted to use teleportation to escape from the boundless chi pillar. Boom! The boundless chi pillar rumbled as it rushed into the void, causing the surrounding space to distort intensely. That nascent soul no longer made any sound. Furthermore, the rumbling sound of the boundless chi pillar was not that loud compared to the neighs of the glacier war horses. The group of cultivators who were focused on the treasures on the cliff did not notice the disappearance of a nascent soul. -13. Chapter 36:11. Since the nascent soul stage adepts who had sneak attacked others ended up in such a miserable state, the nascent soul stage adepts who had been sneak attacked did not fare any better. The Dharma stage adept with a demon body had just rushed out of the magic treasure with his powerful demon body. The green light around him flashed rapidly, as if his Dharma power was not enough to support his Dharma form. At this moment, the ice river suddenly flowed, and a group of armored horses stepped on the ice and surrounded him in an instant. Although the sound of cracking could be heard at the beginning, when the wind blew and the fog arrived, the nascent soul stage adept with a demon body did not appear again. Which of the dozens of nascent soul stage adepts was not arrogant? Which of them would be willing to submit to others? Which of them would care about the ice river and armored horses created by the defense array? Even if they found out that someone was injured or killed, they would only feel happy. They would only feel that there was one less person competing with them. Who would think more about it? On the contrary, the golden elixir stage adepts began to gather together and form a certain formation to resist the defense array together. Of course, their strength was insignificant in this battle between the 28 Star Lords. In a short time, dozens of adepts had fallen. Fortunately, they were not the main targets of the Star Lord Palace, so there were no immortal generals around them. Since ancient times, the onlookers had a clearer view of the situation. Su Tingzi did not feel much when he was fighting for the rare treasure, but now that he was standing at the side and saw how fierce the defense array was, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. If this Yaodai meeting is so dangerous, even if it's for the Imperial Preceptor's lot, even if it's for the rare treasure, who would still participate? Could it be that Kong Hongwu is stupid? In just half a day, several nascent soul stage adepts and dozens of golden elixir stage adepts have fallen in this defense array. What about the other defense arrays? Moreover, there are immortal soldiers and immortal generals hiding in the fog and in the weak water. It is far from what the rumors said before that the defense array was only created by the defense array. Could it be that this Yaodai meeting is different from the previous ones? In the past, no matter how few the Imperial Preceptor's lots were, there were at least dozens or even 50. How could there only be 10? No matter how rare the rare treasures in the past were, it seemed that they could not be compared to this one. Previously, when this old man heard about the rare treasure, I was already blinded by greed. Now that I think about it, isn't this a dead end? Su Tingzi immediately broke out in a cold sweat when he thought of the death trap. Since it was a death trap, how could there be any survivors? Since it was a dead end, how could he allow anyone to speak of this matter? In an instant, Su Tingzi understood why the Star Lord Hall had given out the lot of 10 Imperial advisors and why they had taken out 3 rare treasures. Perhaps there were survivors, and there were 13 of them. Perhaps more, but definitely not too much. The Confucian cultivators' methods are truly too ruthless. Su Tingzi didn't know why the Confucian cultivator was so ruthless, but he knew that this trip wasn't a good one. What should we do? Su Tingzi's gaze was fixed on the Imperial array. Cries of murder filled the entire Imperial array. Reverend Xiangtian and Reverend Yuanqing's figures had already disappeared. The Dharma treasures on the cliff shone with boundless brilliance, and the pillars of Aoran Chi soared into the sky. However, the dense fog and weak water blocked all of this. Su Tingzi could only see the golden core cultivators fleeing in panic like ants. Perhaps I'll have a chance to survive if I mix in with the golden core cultivators. However, if I do that, how am I supposed to live in the future? How am I supposed to survive in the Tao sect? What a pity. If only Xiao Hua was here. That's right, Xiao Hua. That Taoist Xiao seemed to have been injured by the Star Lord guarding the array, but he didn't die like the other nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, that python spear hesitated for a moment, as if it was confirming Xiao Hua's death. Damn it, I'll go all out. Thinking of Xiao Hua's abilities, Su Tingzi couldn't help but feel excited. Xiao Hua was still alive even after being killed by a Star Lord at the 5th stage of origin energy. This level of strength was far beyond his reach. If he could save Xiao Hua, not only would he be indebted to him, he could even borrow Xiao Hua's strength to escape from the Imperial Array. Su Tingzi weighed the pros and cons. He looked at the sky, then looked at the fierce battle in the distance. After destroying a few glaciers, he quietly landed at the place where Xiao Hua had landed. Su Tingzi looked into the distance and also thought about the sky. However, he forgot that he was also a nascent soul cultivator. Some golden core cultivators not too far away from him were also thinking about him. Seeing Su Tingzi quietly land, about 20 golden core cultivators exchanged glances and also followed him to the bottom of the Imperial Array from a distance. The golden core cultivators thought very well, but when they got close to Su Tingzi, they were dumbfounded. They thought that Su Tingzi had found a flaw in the defensive formation, but when they saw Su Tingzi, they only saw him carrying the unconscious Xiao Hua with one hand with a strange expression on his face. You. Su Tingzi was even more dumbfounded than these golden core cultivators. However, he didn't have time to think too much. Several weak winds and glaciers appeared between him and the golden core cultivators. Even if the golden core cultivators fought bravely, 2 of them still died on the spot before Su Tingzi could make a move. We juniors are trapped in this Imperial Array and don't have the ability to escape. We only hope that Senior can help us. Once we leave the Imperial Array, we will definitely follow you through life and death. We will serve Senior or Senior's country. Seeing that Su Tingzi had made a move, the 2 late golden core cultivators at the front were overjoyed and hastily spoke. Don't. Su Tingzi raised his hand and quickly waved it, but before he could say anything, his expression froze. Then, his eyes darted around a few times, and he changed the topic. There was some bitterness and some difficulty in his voice as he said, Forget it. Since we are fated to meet, why not? Help you this time? How could the golden core cultivators notice that Su Tingzi's tone was strange? All of them were about to bow, but just as they were about to do so, Su Tingzi spoke again. However, even I am powerless within the defense formation. I still have to split my energy to take care of all of you. Swear a blood oath right now, or I won't agree. Su Tingzi's words were very honest. No one would risk their lives for a cultivator they didn't know. The golden core cultivators' words from before were indeed a bit careless, so the 2 golden core cultivators at the front didn't hesitate to make the oath. Sure enough, among the 20 or so cultivators, there were still 4 golden core cultivators who weren't sincere. They didn't wait to make the blood oath before activating their magic treasures and rushing elsewhere. They must be looking for their own opportunities inside the Imperial Array. Su Tingzi looked at the backs of these cultivators and coldly smiled. He waved his hand and said, Activate your magic treasures and form an ordinary formation behind me. Although the golden core cultivator at the front had said his name when he made the oath, how could Su Tingzi remember it at this critical moment? He pointed with his finger and said, You. The 3 of you stand in front of the other people's heads. The rest of you, find 3 people to stand behind them, yes? The golden core disciple at the front hurriedly agreed. He turned around and called out a few names. They lined up according to Su Tingzi's instructions. At this moment, a weak wind blew, and the ice river appeared. Su Tingzi led the nearly 20 golden core cultivators into the wind and rain of the formation. With a nascent soul cultivator like Su Tingzi taking care of them, the 20 golden core cultivators only paid the price of 2 golden core cultivators being injured. Su Tingzi's magic treasure was shaped like a drumstick. When he activated it with all his strength, it produced a yellow glow around it. It was called the Heaven-Shaking Hammer. In the time it took to finish a cup of tea, it was able to kill a few dozen golden core cultivators and even a dozen immortal soldiers. However, the more he killed, the paler Su Tingzi's face became. There was even extreme fear in his eyes. Occasionally, he would look at the sky as if he was afraid of attracting the attention of the star monarch guarding the imperial array. When he looked at the cliff, there was even more fog and light. He didn't know how many nascent soul cultivators were still alive, and he didn't know who had obtained the treasure inside the jade box. Seeing that the wind was getting weaker, both the sound of the pipa and the whistle were getting weaker, Su Tingzi's eyes were filled with joy. He waved his hand and whispered, "Quick, follow me and increase our speed. There should be a result over there." This imperial array, unfortunately, before Su Tingzi could finish speaking, he heard a loud whistle and a three-colored python descended from above his head. At the same time, an unparalleled aura came crashing down like a huge mountain. "Save me!" Su Tingzi was shocked and let out a heart-wrenching scream. It was as if he had long been afraid of this aura. As Su Tingzi circulated his spiritual energy, the golden light around him shined brightly. The heaven-shaking hammer turned into a giant hammer and charged at the three-colored python. As for Xiaohua, who was still in his hand, he casually tossed him to the side. Boom! The heaven-shaking hammer flew into the air, but before it could even touch the python's spear, it was sent flying. However, the strange thing was that Su Tingzi didn't seem to have any intention of fighting the python's spear head-on. Although the heaven-shaking hammer was sent flying and Su Tingzi's face was pale, his body continued to fly backward. Roar! The python's spear was like a dragon. It let out an angry roar and stabbed towards Su Tingzi's heart even faster than Su Tingzi's retreat. Under the three-colored light, Su Tingzi's face was ashen. He stared at where the python's spear came from, as if he wanted to see the Star Lord's face clearly. Whoosh! When the python's spear was less than 6 feet away from Su Tingzi, a ray of golden light shot out from the side of the python's spear. The golden light shot into the air, and a thunderous sound echoed. Then, a miserable scream rang out, and the python's spear stopped in midair. Xiaohua, who had been thrown into the air by Su Tingzi, suddenly jumped up. He reached out and used the universe in the sleeve on a three-colored python spear. Although the python spear had returned to its original form, it seemed to have a life of its own as it trembled violently. Wails came from the body of the spear, and strands of righteous spirit rushed out like an aura. Even when Xiaohua's magic power reached out, the Taoist robe fell on the body of the spear, and a thick pillar of Aoran Qi roared with a powerful roar, smashing onto Xiaohua's universe in the sleeve, wanting to work together with the python spear to destroy Xiaohua's magic. -13. Chapter 36:12. Unfortunately, no matter how much the python's spear struggled, even if the weak wind, thick fog, and icy river above Xiaohua's head disappeared, revealing a clear sky, the python's spear still sadly fell into Xiaohua's hands and instantly disappeared. Only then did another drop of blood fall from the sky. All the golden core cultivators prostrated themselves before this aura. While they trembled with fear, they didn't have any thoughts of fighting back at all. However, they were extremely shocked as well. After seeing Su Tingzi's situation, how could they not know that everything had been set up by Xiaohua? Even them following Su Tingzi was a move by Xiaohua to lure the Star Monarch guarding the formation. The few sharp-eyed cultivators who were the first to fall into this defensive formation saw the might of the tricolored python spear when it killed Xiaohua. Then, they saw that Xiaohua was still alive and kicking, as if he was not injured at all. The hope in their hearts rose again. Oomph! A sound that shook the space hundreds of feet in radius fell from the clear sky above everyone's heads. Countless pillars of noble qi descended once again, and everyone's vision darkened. A golden-armored celestial general that was hundreds of feet tall blocked the light that shone into the defensive formation. At the same time, a huge amount of noble qi rushed into the celestial general's left hand, and a huge golden hand slowly appeared in midair. Looking at the celestial general's appearance again, wasn't it one of the 28 star monarchs that had appeared in front of the Yaodai mountain? The aura of this star monarch was like his huge body. Wisps of golden fog flowed out from his golden armor and condensed into huge inscriptions on the armor. Each inscription gave off a powerful aura that was not inferior to the aura of a golden core cultivator. The aura of the inscriptions on the armor gathered together as if it was real, blocking everyone's mouths and noses. The fear of not being able to face an enemy involuntarily rose from the bottom of the hearts of the golden core cultivators. Even Su Tingzi, who had escaped death and looked lucky, could not help but release his aura to resist with all his might. Woo 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 woo. Just as the crowd was in fear, a similarly powerful pillar of chi appeared opposite the celestial lord. With a roar, it rushed into a gradually expanding golden body. Waves of golden light emerged from the golden body like the rising sun, and a similarly rising pressure overflowed from the golden body. Wasn't this Xiao Hua's Transcendence golden body? Xiao Hua's Transcendence golden body appeared and immediately fought against the Star Lord's golden body. A series of violent crackling sounds were produced in the void between the two. In the midst of this explosive sound, the group of Jindan cultivators was blown far away. They actually didn't even have the ability to get close to it. Su Tingzi's eyes turned. Seeing that Ruo Feng, Bing He, and the others near Xiao Hua's golden body had disappeared, he hastily flew towards the golden core cultivators, quietly preparing to sneak out with these golden core cultivators. You are very powerful. That star monarch watched Xiao Hua's golden body form and indifferently said. That voice was like a yellow bell that shook the surroundings loudly. However, once you enter Yaodai Mountain, you will not have the opportunity to leave. This old man is Star Monarch Hall's Star Monarch Jing Mushuan. If you become a star general under this old man's tutelage, this old man will not only guarantee your survival, but will also allow you to obtain everything you want. Whatever you need in your cultivation, whether it is cultivation methods or medicinal pills, this old man can give them all to you. Star Monarch Jing Mushuan? Xiao Hua's eyes slightly narrowed. He sneered and said, You dare use the name of the 28 lunar mansions. You truly are arrogant. If this old man were to become your subordinate, wouldn't this old man's illustrious name be sullied? Since ancient times, Confucianism and Taoism have been different. Since this old man has chosen Taoism, he will not wallow in the mire with Confucianism cultivators like you. Ha ha. You insignificant Taoism cultivator is the arrogant one. Even if you have touched the threshold of essence energy 5th rank, even if you have a scheme to make this old man fall into your trap, how could you know that this old man was probing you? However, this old man was somewhat careless, not expecting your magic weapon to be this powerful. A moment of carelessness and I fell into your trap, that's all. Jing Mushuan laughed heartily. Pointing his finger at the soaring dragon shears flying above Xiao Hua's head, he said, This old man likes that you have some abilities, and this old man just happens to have a vacancy for a star general. This is why this old man said these few words to you. Otherwise, this old man could kill you right now. Noisy. This old man has never seen such an arrogant absorption like yours. Don't you think you'll cut your tongue if you talk big? Xiao Hua was unmoved. This old man has only used 30% of his abilities, and you are not my opponent. If I use all of my abilities, would you not die on the spot? Forget it. Jing Mushuan seemed to have lost his patience. Clenching his hand, a thick and vast pillar of qi condensed into an enormous spear in his hand. This old man knows your intentions. It's a pity that even if you stall for time, those little things cannot possibly break out of the star array. Even you are about to fall into the star array. Woo! Jing Mushuan opened his mouth, and a mouthful of tricolored true qi rushed into the air like a waterfall. Rumble! The earth quaked and the mountains swayed, and the entire mountain ridge swayed. Immediately, that mountain ridge rumbled, and two enormous dragon figures slowly emerged. And at the cliff between the two mountain ridges, a cloud several hundred zhang in size appeared. A portion of the tricolored true qi fell into it, immediately drawing the vast amount of vast qi from the void to pour in. That cloud transformed into a tricolored ball of light that fell into the imperial array. The two dragon figures also roared as they rushed towards this ball of light. Two dragons playing with a pearl? Xiao Hua somewhat understood, and his calm face became gloomy again. This was because, with his tyrannical divine sense, he had already understood that the two dragon figures really surrounded the entire star array in the center. When the dragon figures were hovering around the pearl, it had already driven the entire imperial array. The airflow inside the imperial array was like a knife. The nascent soul cultivators who were previously fighting stopped in horror, trying their best to resist this innate power. As for the nearly 50 gold core cultivators who were lucky enough to survive, they were like dandelions in the wind. They could only roll around, unable to resist. Jing Mushuan did not need to do anything at all. As long as he controlled the huge ball of light to trigger the dragon figures playing with the pearl, all the cultivators would be killed. Eat this old man's staff. Xiao Hua smiled coldly and calmed his heart. He raised the wishful staff with both hands. The staff turned into hundreds of feet in size and smashed towards Jing Mushuan. The staff crossed the sky, and cracks appeared in the void. The whistling sound of the wind rushed into the cracks, and no one could hear it. Jing Mubao's face was full of contempt, but he didn't dare to be careless. The long spear in his hand also didn't dare to be careless. Woo! It let out a strange sound, and also went to meet Xiao Hua. Not only that, when the long spear swayed, a pillar of great spirit as heavy as a mountain, and a great spirit as sharp as a flying sword also appeared around Xiao Hua, rushing toward his golden body. Boom! Bang! The pillar of noble qi hit Xiao Hua's body, and a dark golden crack appeared and a black liquid seeped out of the crack. Jing Mushuan's strength of the 5th level was not just for show. The power of this blow alone could kill a nascent soul cultivator. However, when the noble qi fell on Xiao Hua's golden body, Xiao Hua's wishful staff also smashed on Jing Mushuan's long spear. With a loud bang, not only was the long spear smashed, but Jing Mushuan's arm was also hit by the wishful staff. The newly regenerated left arm was now splashed with blood and flesh. See, Jing Mushuan sucked in a breath of cold air in pain and hurriedly urged his genuine qi. However, seeing the birth of 3-colored genuine qi, his injured arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, one injury after another made Jing Mushuan's face even paler. I have to say, this old man has underestimated you, Jing Mubao said solemnly. He did not dare to neglect and hurriedly took out a huge strange weapon from his chinkuan bag. The weapon looked like a long spear, but there was a big hand in front of his head. The hand was holding a thick dagger. Kill. Xiao Hua already had the intention to kill. Without waiting for Jing Mushuan to take the weapon, the wishful staff in his hand stirred up the wind and clouds and struck again. Jing Mushuan was also a good martial artist. He waved his huge weapon and urged the abundant noble qi in the defensive array to fight with Xiao Hua. These two huge golden bodies fought in a chaotic battle. In just half a cup of tea's time, the entire defensive array was disturbed by the two. Even the two dragon forms were not as powerful as the two. However, Xiao Hua was not as calm as Jing Mushuan. He wanted to protect himself and save Su Tingzi and the others, so he must kill Jing Mushuan. Jing Mushuan was an immortal general of the 5th level. It was easy to defeat him, but how difficult was it to kill him? Also, Jing Mushuan could borrow the power of the defensive array, so the possibility of Xiao Hua killing him was really small. In particular, Jing Mushuan was still fighting with Xiao Hua with ease and did not borrow the power of the defensive array. Xiao Hua waved his staff and knocked Jing Mushuan down half a foot. He squinted at Jing Mushuan's golden body and then looked at the two dragon forms in the distance. Unconsciously, he had a plan in mind. At this time, Xiao Hua did not have his own spiritual treasure that could kill Jing Mushuan in one blow, but he would not test it one by one like before. However, Jing Mubao roared angrily, and a 3-colored auspicious cloud appeared under his feet. He waved his strange weapon again, and the Howren Qi swords that could flatten a mountain peak stabbed towards Xiao Hua. A huge roar also came from the hand in front of the weapon. Although Xiao Hua's golden body was cut down and collapsed piece by piece, his face was still as calm as water. The invisible nascent soul controlled by the green-robed Xiao Hua quietly appeared above his head. The Tang Jiao shears, which was flashing with golden light in midair, turned into a huge dragon again and rushed toward Jing Mushuan. That huge dragon swung its tail at Jing Mushuan's back. You have some skills. Seeing Xiao Hua multitasking, using his divine thoughts to activate the Tang Jiao shears while fighting him, Jing Mushuan was slightly surprised. Just as this faint surprise appeared, he saw a small gourd appear above Xiao Hua's head. In the blink of an eye, something with a nose and eyes emerged from the mouth of the gourd. Jing Mushuan's mind was in a trance. Oh, not good. Jing Mushuan turned pale with fright and hurriedly patted his head. A three-colored genuine qi rushed into the sky and instantly turned into a majestic Z-13. Chapter 36:13. This Z was different from Xiao Hua's previous Z. It was dressed like a general, and even the appearance of this Z was somewhat similar to Jing Mubai. Three Qi's unification. Refine the spirit back to the void. As soon as Xiao Hua saw Jing Mubao's tricolored true qi and Z, he immediately understood. Jing Mubao had not only cultivated the three qis unifying the origin, but he had also refined his mind into the Z, reaching the stage of refining the mind back to the void. Moreover, when this Z appeared, Jing Mubai's absent-minded eyes immediately became clear. Even when the two green and red spirit execution yuan light fell on the top of this Z's head, they were stopped by the three-colored true qi and could not fall at all. Even so, Jing Mubao, who was lucky enough to escape, was sweating profusely on his back. He was still in a state of shock. As soon as he felt this, a sharp pain came from his back. The soaring dragon shears had taken advantage of his resistance to the spirit-slaying yuan light to cut off a large piece of his back. Damn it! Jing Mubai gritted his teeth. The three-colored Z above his head waved its hand, and countless inscriptions fell from its hand. Jing Mubai was a military Confucian cultivator. His Z was not only dressed like a general, but also could control the inscriptions with a raise of its hand. It was somewhat similar to the Confucian cultivators of Confucianism. Cha-cha-cha. As the inscriptions in the hands of the Z smashed down, thunderbolts appeared from the clear sky around Xiao Hua, flocking into Xiao Hua's golden body. Boom! The thunderbolts of the Z were really powerful. Not only could it blow down the entire mountain range, but Xiao Hua's golden body also collapsed along with it. However, the thing that made Jing Mushue raise her eyebrows happened again. She saw a green light flashed between Xiao Hua's eyebrows, and one by one, the green seal characters that were even colder than the inscriptions appeared. Then, a spell that sounded like the whispers of the gods resounded in the air. Rumble. Layers of dense lightning appeared and fell on his golden body. Incomparable numbness came out, and the golden body collapsed in an instant. Moreover, the collapse spread rapidly, and there was no way to stop it. What kind of method is this? Has this Yaodai mountain already locked the Dao sect's thunder drawing technique? How can this cultivator use it? Moreover, how could this lightning have anything to do with the strange characters? Jing Mubao was completely dumbfounded. Admittedly, Jing Mubao was stunned by Xiao Hua's means, but his nightmare had just begun. Because under the dark green lightning, he did not know when a layer of two-colored fire net had sprouted from the bottom of his feet, rolling up from bottom to top. As soon as his golden body touched this fire net, it immediately turned into pure liquid and fell into the air. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Jing Mubao roared in succession. It was unknown whether he was scolding Xiao Hua, regretting that he had carelessly lost his weapon, or scolding himself for not even preparing too many imperial weapons and scrolls. While Jing Mubao was cursing, the tricolored Z above his head suddenly flew up. His right hand clenched into a fist, and like a meteor piercing through the sun, he smashed towards Xiao Hua's head with an irresistible imprisoning force. Hee. Xiao Hua sneered. The green-robed Xiao Hua controlled his invisible nascent soul to immediately fly out from the top of Xiao Hua's head. His two hands hugged the air, and streaks of lightning slowly emerged, preparing to launch a sneak attack halfway. However, just as Xiao Hua's nascent soul flew out, it immediately gave birth to a kind of indescribable warning sign. A vague, huge suction force came from the depths of the defensive formation. Although it had not yet come out, It had already locked onto Xiao Hua's nascent soul. The green-robed Xiao Hua shuddered. He did not have time to sneak attack Jing Mubao, and immediately urged his nascent soul to land on top of Xiao Hua's head. When this nascent soul touched Xiao Hua's body, the warning sign immediately disappeared, and the suction force also disappeared. Damn it! What's going on? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. It was also because of this absent-mindedness that Xiao Hua immediately lost the opportunity. The Bz's fist fell down. Xiao Hua looked at the head that he dodged, but it was precisely his left shoulder that collapsed. Rumble. With a series of muffled sounds, Xiao Hua's several hundred zhang golden body could no longer support and slowly shrunk. Jing Mubao was also not that strong. When the Z just hit Xiao Hua's golden body, Jing Mubao felt his mind become confused again, and the soul punishing Yuan light once again had a tendency to fall. He hastily withdrew the Z, and then looked at Xiao Hua, who hastily withdrew his golden body, and a trace of a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, that Z waved his hand, and a huge ball of light fell in front of him. Those two dragon-shaped figures dragged their long dragon bodies and pounced over. Jing Mubao lowered his head and looked at the fire net that he couldn't extinguish even with his noble qi. He knew that if he didn't kill Xiao Hua, he wouldn't be able to escape. But he saw Jing Mubao grin. The Z above his head waved his hands, and the huge ball of light immediately divided into three under the noble qi that was sharper than the edge of a blade. Among these three balls of light, the one in the Z's hand was bigger, and the other two were smaller. Go! A majestic voice that could shake the entire defensive formation burst out from the Z's mouth. It was more ear-piercing than spring thunder. Two vast noble qi pillars emitted a huge rumbling sound as they penetrated the heaven and earth and directly rushed into the two small balls of light. At the same time, the Z opened his mouth again, and three-colored Zhun Qi spurted out like a rainbow bridge, which divided into two and fell on top of the balls of light. Roar! The two dragon figures raised their huge heads. Although the dragon heads were blurry, they revealed an indescribable excitement. When the dragon heads opened, a cold and dark aura was emitted from the holes in the dragon heads. The two balls of light that were filled with Jing Mubao's condensed Zhun Qi fell into the dragon heads. Pa. The originally blurry dragon heads, after the three-colored Zhun Qi fell into their mouths, clearly had some color, like the finishing touch, and this color quickly spread over the dragon body. Roar! The earth shook, and the ice river and the weak wind formation were now crazily surging. Along with the swaying of the two dragon figures, an imposing aura that could suppress everything, along with the entire defensive formation, rushed towards Xiao Hua. Jing Mubao smiled, and his smile was very bright. Although the fire net under his feet had not been extinguished, and although the spirit-slaying light above the head of the Bzi was still threatening his life, he was not the slightest bit afraid. The momentum of the two dragons playing with a pearl was the final killing move of the defensive formation. While Xiao Hua was scheming against him, he was also scheming against Xiao Hua. Jing Mubao had never seen a Taoist cultivator who could escape from the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl. In the previous Jade Pavilion gathering, the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl was enough to catch all the Taoist cultivators in one fell swoop. Who knows what the Palace Master is thinking? Today, he actually opened the 28 star arrays. The strength of this Taoist cultivator is far beyond the 4th level of Yuanli. It would be a pity to kill him. It's better to suppress him and use him for me. Jing Mubao secretly calculated. Unfortunately, there was always an accident. Just as Jing Mubao smiled, he saw a disc spit out from Xiao Hua's mouth. As soon as the disc came out, it suddenly expanded. Layers of golden dragon qi gushed out from the disc, and within this dragon qi, countless images of mountains and rivers emerged. Jing Mubao was stunned. His heart gave birth to a kind of unimaginable feeling. He watched as the whole disc instantly turned into an oval-shaped imperial jade seal in the midst of the dragon qi. A terrifying aura rushed out of the imperial jade seal, causing immortals and mortals to retreat. It rushed towards Xiao Hua's two dragon forms and pressed down. Suppress. Xiao Hua coldly roared. Although his voice was much less dignified than the previous Z, it was still exceptionally clear and incomparably powerful. Following this voice, the two dragon figures trembled violently. The dragon chi of the mountain and river seal descended like a large hand. Regardless of whether it was the dragon head or the dragon pearl, it grabbed them all in one go. You, how can you have the national weapon? You, how can you control the national weapon? How can you control the fate of a country? Jing Mubao shouted in disbelief, and then his Z also trembled like a sieve under the suppression of the dragon chi. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before arose in his heart. Logically speaking, although the mountain and river seal was powerful, it might not be able to suppress him, a Star Lord of Star Lord Palace. However, in order to control the imperial formation of the two dragons playing with the pearl, he had fused his genuine chi with the dragon pearls. He knew that he had not been able to completely kill Jing Mubao according to his previous plan. Jing Mubao knew that he could not escape death at the last moment, and did not hesitate to self-detonate his spirit to perish together with Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua's cultivation was on par with Jing Mubao's, and he had many means, it was impossible for him to stop Jing Mubao's self-detonation at the same level. -13. Chapter 36:14. Xiao Hua hastily put away the sword gourd. Ignoring the soaring dragon shears, he had dragon-veined Xiao Hua use the mountain and river seal to block the two dragon-shaped tails in front of him. That fifth-grade Star Monarch's self-detonation had already arrived. Rumble. The entire defensive formation shook once again, and all the mountains and rivers within a dozen li turned into nothingness. Wave after wave of chi rushed into the sky, spreading in all directions. Xiao Hua, who was at the center of the chi waves, could no longer resist. His dragon-shaped chi was smashed into fragments, his defensive earth shields were torn apart, and clusters of protective golden light were instantly extinguished. In the end, his golden body was torn into pieces, and the brilliance of Xiao Hua's physical body was extinguished. It was like a fallen leaf drifting in the air with the waves. After the time it took to eat a meal, the entire defensive formation slowly calmed down. Originally, the defensive formation controlled by Jing Mushuan was one of the 28 star formations. It covered an area of several dozen li. As a fifth-grade Star Monarch, Jing Mushuan's self-detonation was equivalent to a Taoist spirit-severing cultivator. His self-detonation could cover 100 li, or even several hundred li. However, in order to kill Xiao Hua, Jing Mushuan specially controlled the range of his self-detonation. Of the entire defensive formation, only the area where Xiao Hua and Jing Mushuan fought turned into nothingness. After a long while, suddenly, an arrogant and shrill laugh came from the ground. "Damn it, I'm actually still alive. This rare treasure is mine. Ha ha ha." Immediately, a black and rough nascent soul cultivator flew up from the ground. His divine sense swept through the entire mountain peak, as if he was looking for the jade box that Jing Mushuan and the other nascent soul cultivators failed to snatch before his death. Just as this cultivator released his divine sense, 5 different divine senses appeared in the mountain range. These 6 divine senses suddenly collided in the air. Then, 5 nascent soul cultivators with tattered Taoist robes rushed into the air from different hiding places. The 6 of them stood still in midair like trapped beasts, their faces still in shock. More than a dozen nascent soul cultivators had fallen into the defensive formation, and only a few of them had been killed in the fierce battle. The others were only injured, but Jing Mu's self-detonation had almost killed all of the nascent soul cultivators who were seriously injured. Although the remaining 6 nascent soul cultivators had managed to escape, it appeared that they had also suffered significant losses. Reverend Yuanqing and Reverend Shangtian each stood at a corner. Their faces also carried the same expression of luck. They had already realized that everything was part of Xiao Hua's plan when Xiao Hua suddenly attacked and killed Jing Mubai. Especially Taoist Yuanqing, who had some understanding of Xiao Hua, immediately understood that the fight between the two would not end well. He made a decision almost instantaneously, giving up on snatching the rare treasure in the jade box and fleeing into the distance as soon as possible, away from the place where the two were fighting. Although Reverend Shangtian was arrogant, he was also alert. He had been paying attention to Reverend Yuanqing, who was hostile to him. When he saw Reverend Yuanqing give up the rare treasure, although he was extremely unwilling, he also fled, as far as possible from Xiaohua and the others. Even though the two of them had reacted early, they were still injured by Jing Mubai's dying strike. After escaping the calamity and coming out again, each of them had different feelings. Daoist Xiangtian felt both lucky and ecstatic. It could be said that he had survived a double calamity. He had formed a personal grudge with Xiaohua. He even considered killing Xiaohua with the power of wind and thunder after leaving the Imperial Formation or the Jade Pavilion gathering. Now, seeing that Xiaohua's means were even more powerful than the Star Monarch guarding the formation, Daoist Xiangtian shuddered. He really didn't dare to imagine the result if he dealt with Xiaohua. Who would live and who would die? Fortunately, this guy perished together with the Guardian Star, so I didn't have to worry about it. This is Xiaohua's remains? Just as Reverend Xiangtian was rejoicing, his divine sense swept over and suddenly found an abnormally damaged body. This body was covered in a blood-stained Taoist robe, and there was not a single piece of undamaged flesh on the body. Those tightly closed, slender eyes, and that deathly pale face without any color of blood. Wasn't this Xiaohua, who had shocked Reverend Xiangtian greatly? Not good. This guy is still breathing. As soon as Reverend Xiangtian discovered Xiaohua's corpse, he immediately became frightened and couldn't help but steal glances at the other cultivators. Fortunately, Reverend Yuanqing and the other cultivators were taking pills, and the places where the jade box could be located were all swept by their spiritual sense. Therefore, no one discovered Xiaohua's corpse. If this guy is allowed to recover, wouldn't this old man's previous plan be for naught? If this guy is allowed to come back to life, how can this old man still have a share of the rare treasure in the jade box? Moreover, if Reverend Yuanqing knew that Xiaohua was not dead, wouldn't he immediately save him? The favor of saving a 5th-grade essence chi cultivator, I'm afraid he won't be able to repay it in his lifetime. Reverend Xiangtian's heart could not help but violently beat. Moreover, Xiaohua just killed the Star Monarch guarding the formation, his magic treasure, and his nascent soul. He even took the Star Monarch guarding the formation. Damn, this is comparable to the rare treasure in the jade box. With this thought, Reverend Xiangtian's right hand trembled slightly, and the damaged flying sword in his hand could not help but let out a low sword hum. However, just as Xiangtian was tempted, he hesitated again. After all, before this, Xiaohua had already used a trick to deceive the heavens. As early as when he entered the formation, he pretended to be injured by Jing Muxiao's python spear, luring Jing Muxiao into a trap. Who knew if Xiaohua was using another trick at this time? However, Xiaohua's body fluttered down and crashed into a mountain peak. The collapsed mountain peak blocked Xiaohua's fall. Xiaohua's body rolled a few times on the mountain peak. His body was covered with a lot of dust. Even the rocks on the mountain peak gradually rolled down and slid off Xiaohua's body. There were also traces of blood on the rocks after they slid off Xiaohua's body. Seeing this, Daoist Xiangtian immediately understood that Xiaohua must have fainted. Even the nascent soul in Xiaohua's body must have been knocked out by Jing Mubai's self-detonation. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to kill Xiaohua, even if Xiaohua didn't wake up, as long as the nascent soul caught its breath, it would definitely attract Daoist Yuanqing's attention. However, Reverend Xiangtian still underestimated the vigilance of Reverend Yuanqing and the other nascent soul cultivators. Although the other 5 were taking pills, the sword hum in Reverend Xiangtian's hand caused them to raise their heads. Humph! Sage Xiangtian coldly snorted and swept his gaze across the crowd. The flying sword in his hand moved, and a not-so-brilliant sword light soared into the sky, fiercely stabbing towards the heart of Xiaohua, who had landed on the cliff in the distance. Everyone was stunned and hurriedly looked in that direction. 2 cultivators raised their hands and were about to release their magic treasures. Everyone thought that Reverend Xiangtian had discovered the Imperial Jade Seal and hurriedly attacked. However, when they saw that Reverend Xiangtian was attacking Xiaohua's body with their eyes and spiritual sense, they were stunned. After all, in their hearts, Xiaohua should have died a long time ago. Reverend Yuanqing was also stunned. The flying halberd was like the magic treasures of the other nascent soul cultivators and stopped in midair. Without the restriction of the defensive formation, a nascent soul cultivator was no different from a fierce tiger with wings. Daoist Shangtian took the initiative to attack, and with Daoist Yuanqing's hesitation, the meteor-like lightning had already pierced Xiaohua's chest. An indescribable expression appeared on Reverend Yuanqing's face. He pointed his finger and was about to retrieve the halberd. He knew that even if he and Reverend Shangtian attacked together, they wouldn't be able to snatch it away. Rather than offending Reverend Shangtian for no reason, it would be better to wait for an opportunity to escape. Although Reverend Shangtian's expression didn't change, his heart was still clenched. He was afraid that something would happen again. Seeing that Reverend Yuanqing no longer tried to stop him and that the flying sword was about to reach Xiaohua, Reverend Shangtian's heart dropped. After all, they were so close that even if Xiaohua was in perfect condition, he would still be seriously injured. He already had the advantage against Xiaohua. People with ulterior motives will always encounter ghosts. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Xiaohua's chest, an iron rod suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua. Moreover, the iron rod suddenly expanded and blocked the flying sword with a flick of a finger. Clang! A loud noise rang out, and sparks flew everywhere. The flying sword pierced the iron staff and unexpectedly let out a mournful cry. A cluster of sword light scattered out like cold plum blossoms, falling in defeat in front of Xiaohua. Reverend Shangtian was stunned. He was familiar with this iron staff. Wasn't it the same staff that Xiaohua was holding before? Moreover, at this moment, Shangtian's heart turned to ashes. Deceiving the heavens, 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 deceiving. Seeing that Xiaohua's face was somewhat dirty and messy, like the eyes of a morning star, Reverend Shangtian hurriedly circulated his magic power. At this moment, a strange golden light flew over from the side. The frightened Reverend Shangtian didn't even have time to defend. The golden light cut through Reverend Shangtian's waist in the blink of an eye, causing blood to spurt out. Reverend Shangtian looked down in disbelief at the blood that was slowly flowing out of his body. Above his head, a bright light flashed and a 6-foot-tall Yuanying appeared. It was holding a small sword in its hand and wearing a small soft armor. As soon as this Yuanying appeared, its body flashed with light. It simply didn't want to face anyone and hid itself in the void. It wanted to teleport away. Xiaohua's face was as calm as water as he stood up. The sword gourd flew out of the space and covered Taoist Master Shangtian's Yuanying. The green and red spirit slaying Yuan light rushed out, preparing to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. However, before the spirit slaying origin light could fly out, a white mist appeared in the sky. Within the mist, an aura that caused all the cultivators to suffocate came from the nascent soul. A majestic pillar of aura descended from the sky and covered the nascent soul. The majestic pillar of aura was so solid that the spirit-slaying origin light couldn't land on the nascent soul. Even the nascent soul, which was originally in a daze, woke up. However, after waking up, the nascent soul was even more afraid because the majestic pillar of aura had dragged it out of the sky. However, if he were to refine the soaring dragon scissors and the ice deadly mirror into spirit treasures, Xiaohua felt that it was inappropriate. It could even be said that it was not worth it. Previously, Xiaohua's main goal was to refine the 5 elements wishful staff, but after much effort, he discovered that what he was refining was only the heaven-leveling staff. Now, he had finally obtained the main material for the refining of the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel. However, It was a huge task to refine it. It was definitely not something he could complete now. This made Xiaohua feel as if he was drawing water with a bamboo basket. It's difficult. Xiaohua sighed. With a turn of his hand, he put the soaring dragon scissors into the space. Then, with a move of his finger, he took out the sword gourd. Now, the sword gourd was extremely powerful. Even Jing Mulong was buried under the spirit extermination vital light. However, there was another problem with the spirit extermination vital light that was difficult to solve. That was, the sword light was not very sharp. Not to mention Jing Mulong, who was a 5th grade elemental power. Even Reverend Xiangtian and Lung Qingge, who were 4th grade elemental power, could withstand it. Of course, Xiaohua also knew that the extreme magnetic light was the key to refining the spirit extermination vital light, but he couldn't find the extreme magnetic light. How can a spirit treasure be easy to refine? Looking at the sword gourd, Xiaohua's heart gave birth to a realization. Although this Xiao's magic treasures are not very useful, they are gradually being perfected. When the opportunity comes, this Xiao's spirit treasure will be earth-shattering, right? The ancients often say that haste makes waste. This is probably the case. After putting away the sword gourd, Xiaohua released his divine sense and looked around at the 5 nascent soul cultivators who were searching for him. Then, he released his soul awareness to search for Su Tingzi's location. Compared to Reverend Yuan Qing, Xiaohua cared more about Su Tingzi. After all, Su Tingzi had received Xiaohua's instructions to use him as bait to lure Jing Mulong out. Xiaohua would remember this favor. After looking for a moment, Xiaohua recalled a little, identified a direction, and flew in a certain direction. Then, he released his Buddhist awareness to look around. As he looked, Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. Then, his figure flashed and he entered the ground. After a moment, he flew out again. In his hand, he was holding an earth-yellow magic treasure that was several feet in size. This earth-yellow magic treasure was Su Tingzi's heaven-shaking hammer. Gently placing the heaven-shaking hammer on the ground, Xiaohua stretched out his index finger. At the tip of his finger, a similarly earthy yellow light landed on the heaven-shaking hammer like a sharp thorn. The heaven-shaking hammer let out a soft rumble and slowly retracted. It returned to the size of a palm and landed in Xiaohua's hand. Looking at the ground now, it was a rather tragic sight. Inside, Su Tingzi's face was yellow and his eyes were tightly shut. Just as he moved his eyeballs, he opened his eyelids with difficulty. Of the nearly 20 golden core cultivators behind him, only 9 were alive. The other 10 had already turned into broken limbs. Even though these 9 people were still alive, Xiaohua's Buddha's consciousness had already swept over them. He had already found out that these 9 people were already seriously injured. Not only had their corporeal bodies been damaged, but even their golden cores had also been shattered. If they didn't take the spirit pills as soon as possible, then they would die in less than 2 hours. Taoist Master Xiao. Su Tingzi opened his eyes and saw that it was Xiaohua. Joy appeared on his face. He forced a smile and said, "I didn't disappoint you." Xiaohua nodded. Fellow Taoists, righteousness is something that I will remember in my heart. Not only did you help me lure out the Star Monarch guarding the array, you even protected the 9 golden core disciples. Although you were heavily injured, their lives were saved. Su Tingzi slowly sat up and looked at the 9 golden core cultivators. He sighed and said, "Their lives are saved for now, but they will die sooner or later. I was moved by Taoist Master Xiao and became a good person for once." Xiaohua said with a smile, "Good people will be rewarded. Fellow Taoist, you didn't care about your own safety and used your natal magic treasure to protect them. How can I let them die?" Su Tingzi's eyes flashed with surprise. He said anxiously, Taoist Master Xiao, do you have the 9 Revolutions life-extending pill?" Xiaohua was sweating profusely. He waved his hand and said, "I don't have that kind of spirit item, but I have other medicinal pills." As he spoke, he first handed the heaven-shaking hammer to Su Tingzi. Then, he took out a few medicinal pills and handed them to him. He said with a smile, "Try this medicinal pill of mine." Su Tingzi naturally knew that this wasn't the time to be polite. He put away his magic treasure and took out a medicinal pill and put it in his mouth. Su Tingzi's face was filled with ecstasy as soon as the medicinal pill entered his mouth. He immediately closed his eyes and started to circulate his cultivation. Xiaohua hurriedly said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. There are still 9 golden core disciples who need your help. I have to circulate my cultivation and don't have time to help them. Although they made a blood oath to me, they made a blood oath to Taoist Master Xiao. I'll have to trouble Taoist Master Xiao with their matters." Su Tingzi still hadn't recovered from his injuries, so how could he care about others? He closed his eyes and circulated his cultivation. However, Pan Yu and the others seemed to have never heard of a blood oath being transferred to someone else. They couldn't help but look at each other. Xiao Hua looked at the 9 late-stage golden core cultivators and rolled his eyes. He nodded and said, "Since fellow Taoist Su Tingzi has the heart, then I can't be careless. If you're willing to serve me loyally, I can naturally protect your lives. As long as I can walk out of Yaodai Mountain, I'll definitely bring you out. Moreover, I can also guarantee your future cultivation, including cultivation methods, medicinal pills, and other things." -13. Chapter 36:16. Thank you, Senior. We are willing to pledge our loyalty to Senior. Pan Yu and the others were overjoyed. Being able to pledge their loyalty to someone as powerful as Xiao Hua naturally brought them many benefits. However, Xiao Hua frowned again and said with difficulty, "But the problem is that even if this old man wants to protect all of you, there are still many defensive formations in the Jade Pavilion gathering. Even if all of you stay close to this old man doesn't have much confidence, Senior." A golden core cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was in a difficult position and said in a low voice, "Senior, don't you have the nation treasure? That thing can be used to suppress cultivators of our generation, so it can naturally contain us. It won't be too late to let us out after Senior leaves the Jade Pavilion conference." In fact, Xiao Hua originally wanted to let them enter his Qinkuan bag or spirit storage bag, but after hearing this golden core cultivator's words, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He nodded and said, "All right, then I'll have to trouble you all." Taoist Master Xiao. Su Tingzi opened his eyes and hurriedly called out, "You should also suppress I. Why do I feel like I won't be able to last until the Jade Pavilion conference ends with my injuries?" "That's fine," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "As long as fellow Taoist doesn't worry, I can enter." Su Tingzi's words were half a joke. After all, once he entered the mountain and river seal, his entire life would be in Xiao Hua's hands. No matter what Xiao Hua did to him, he wouldn't be able to resist. However, when Su Tingzi heard Xiao Hua's straightforward answer and thought about his impression of Xiao Hua in this short period of time, he couldn't help but be tempted. After Xiao Hua finished speaking with Su Tingzi, he raised his hand and took out 9 medicinal pills. He handed them to Pan Yu and the others and said, "These are the medicinal pills that I used before. They should be able to help you all condense your golden cores. Take them now, and after I put you all into the mountain and river seal, you can take advantage of this time to cultivate." Condense golden cores? Pan Yu and the others could not believe their ears. They all carefully received the mountain river seal and hurriedly put it into the air. Xiao Hua did not hold back and had Dragon Vein Xiao Hua use the mountain river seal to suppress the 9 people inside. Su Tingzi was moved. Although Xiao Hua didn't say who refined this pill, Su Tingzi had never heard of any famous alchemist in the hidden immortal continent who could refine this legendary pill. Even if Xiao Hua didn't know how to refine pills, if Xiao Hua was able to get acquainted with this kind of person, he would definitely be able to gain some benefits if he befriended Xiao Hua. Therefore, without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Su Tingzi took the initiative and said with a smile, "Taoist Master Xiao, there is also I, don't forget. Is fellow Taoist really willing?" Xiao Hua smiled meaningfully. "I thought fellow Taoist was just joking. Sigh, didn't Taoist Master Xiao say it already? Good people have good karma. I just did a good deed. Spiritual Master, you should let I have a good karma, right?" Su Tingzi blinked his eyes and smiled. When Xiao Hua heard this, he nodded solemnly and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I won't disappoint you." "Many thanks, Taoist Master Xiao." Ever since Su Tingzi woke up, he had been calling Xiao Hua Taoist Master Xiao instead of fellow Taoist Xiao. Dragon Vein Xiaohua activated the mountain and river seal. Just as he was about to put Su Tingzi away, Su Tingzi suddenly shouted, "Taoist Master Xiao, please wait." "Oh?" Xiaohua said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Fellow Taoist, are you regretting it?" "No." Su Tingzi waved his hand. "Previously, inside the defensive formation, I saw two strange things. Now that I suddenly remembered, I have to remind Taoist Master. Fellow Taoist, please speak." Xiaohua was bewildered. After hearing Su Tingzi talk about the two nascent soul cultivators' nascent souls disappearing after their deaths, he asked again, then, "Fellow Taoist, do you know if such strange things happened in the Jade Pavilion gathering?" Su Tingzi shook his head slightly. I don't know. However, from what I know, it doesn't seem to be the case. Of course, it said that there are many defensive formations in the Jade Pavilion gathering, and every defensive formation is different. Perhaps the defensive formation we fell into is different from the others. I understand. I'll pay attention. Xiaohua temporarily suppressed his doubts and said, "Fellow Taoist, you should go back and cultivate." As he spoke, he activated the mountain and river seal and suppressed Su Tingzi. After putting everyone away, Xiaohua looked at the mountain and river seal in his hand and smiled. This mountain and river seal was actually a bit similar to a cosmos bag, but the space inside was much larger. Putting people into a cosmos bag sounded very disgusting, but if it was put into the mountain and river seal, it sounded more comfortable. However, in reality, what was the difference? It wasn't as comfortable as his own space. A nation weapon, a nation weapon, a nation weapon. How interesting. Xiaohua spun the mountain and river seal in his hand and put it back into his meridians. He looked up at the clear sky and muttered, "Damn it. Li wanted me to keep a low profile, but I broke a Celestial Lord's defensive formation as soon as I arrived and even killed a Celestial Lord. How can I keep a low profile in the future? Now that the defensive formation is broken and the Celestial Lord is dead, Kong Hongwu will fly into a rage. I really don't know what methods he'll use to deal with me. It seems that he won't rest until he's dead. It's time for me to change my appearance." On the Jade Mountain, within the Celestial Lord Palace, there was a huge space. Kong Hongwu was standing in the starry sky with his hands behind his back. Behind Kong Hongwu were a boy and a girl. They each held a flute and a sword in their hands as they stood there respectfully. However, the two boys' gazes were different from Kong Hongwu's. Kong Hongwu narrowed his eyes as if he had a card up his sleeve. As for the two boys, they looked at the starry sky below them without blinking, their faces filled with anticipation. The stars in the starry sky were dazzling, and each star flickered with a different brilliance. Aside from the ordinary brilliance, there was also a faint mist. This mist was either like a thin thread or like cotton. It was actually different. However, if one looked carefully, they would be able to see the strangeness of the starry sky. Although there were many formations in the starry sky, they were sparse. It was far from being as dense as the real starry sky. Moreover, there were only a few dozen stars that could be considered dense. The brilliance of these stars linked together, and they were either shaped like a rooster or a black bear. It was very dazzling. If Xiaohua was here, he would definitely be able to tell that there were exactly 28 stars in these dozens of spots. They were the 28 lunar mansions. There was another special place in the starry sky. Under the starry sky, there was something that looked like a long river. This thing seemed to hold up the entire starry sky. Above the long river, there were layers of purple clouds. Between the layers, there were mountains, ridges, long rivers, streams, and so on. Occasionally, the shadows of cities and farmhouses could be seen. Suddenly, on a star that was not shining brightly, a small light dust fell like a meteor. This light dust fell into the long river under the starry sky. At the same time, a thin white line rushed out from the long river and caught the light dust. When the light dust fell into the long river, it did not cause any splashes. 35. The girl was quick to speak and hurriedly shouted, "Palace Master, 35 have already appeared." Kong Hongwu faintly replied. His brows slightly furrowed, as if he was not very happy. The girl's pearl-like eyes turned slightly and she smiled. "Palace Master, What is this thing? How come I have not seen it in the previous Jade Pavilion conference? It's really fun. Fun? Kong Hongwu opened his eyes and a smile appeared on his face. He said, in this world, the most beautiful thing is to sit and watch the clouds rise and fall. The most calming thing is to wait for the flowers to bloom and wilt. In this world, the most satisfying thing is to control the life and death of others. The two children were dumbfounded. They looked at each other and did not know what to say. The boy thought for a moment and asked, Palace Master, when the Dragon Gate was opened, I saw what a Taoist rush into the Dragon Gate. Why did he participate in the Jade Pavilion conference? Did he think that the reward from Palace Master was not enough and came to my Jade Mountain to pick spirit herbs? He is really too greedy. Humph. Hearing the mention of Hua de Taoist, a layer of anger appeared on Kong Hongwu's face. He slightly nodded and said, yes, he is indeed too greedy. Little Yun, remember, people die for wealth and birds die for food. This is an old saying that describes human greed. Since ancient times, who knows how many people have died because of this sentence? Little Huada is not walking the Dragon Gate. It is a dead end. Don't be greedy in the future. The boy named Little Yun hurriedly bowed and said, yes, Palace Master, I will remember. I can get whatever I want in front of Palace Master. I won't be greedy. Kong Hongwu smiled and looked at Little Yun. You are still young. How can you know how big the temptation of this world is? Do you think those Tao sect cultivators who came to participate in the Jade Pavilion conference don't know the disadvantages of greed? Do you think they didn't say such words in the past? Greed is the biggest enemy in life. Palace Master, look, there is a lot of light dust falling. While speaking, the girl jumped up and clapped her hands, saying, so beautiful, just like fireworks. Kong Hongwu raised his head and looked. Sure enough, there was a snake-shaped star flashing with extremely brilliant brilliance. Under that brilliance, dozens of light dust fell one after another. Above the long river, there was a rushing filament that pulled these light dust into the river. Kong Hongwu unconsciously showed a satisfied smile on his face. There is also that one. Little Yun was not to be outdone. He also pointed at a tiger-like star and shouted, and there are more fireworks, more beautiful. Before the little girl could take it out, the starry sky was filled with specks of light dust. There were more and less specks of light dust, and they were exceptionally bright. This caused the corners of Kong Hongwu's mouth to curl up again, and he looked very proud. But when Kong Hongwu slightly lowered his head and was about to squint his eyes, suddenly, at the place where the previous star was, the whole star rushed out a few feet of starlight. Near the star, there was a dragon-shaped star river that fiercely rotated and crashed into the star. -13.